A quiet evening settles over neighborhoods and fields. Porch lights dim, windows glow, and beyond the roofs and trees, the sky opens like a velvet sea. In that soft darkness, a pale smear glides among the constellations. It is small to the eye, almost nothing, yet it carries the feeling of something ancient, a traveler that has crossed long, cold distances to brush Earth's night with a gentle stroke. People who notice it pause at their doors. Telescopes swivel. Cameras begin a slow sequence of exposures. The world inhales, and somewhere in that silence, a faint rhythm begins to form. They call the visitor 3 To most, the name is a string of letters and numbers. To the watchers, it is a story still unfolding. They follow its path, its orbit across the starfield, measuring position against background points of starlight. The motion is patient, steady, neither rushed nor wandering, like a careful hand. Drawing a line. Instruments trace its trajectory and note how the sunlight scatters in its thin halo. The halo is called a coma, a cloud of gas and dust that glows in a soft, pearly veil around the icy core. From that veil, a tail streams outward. A brush stroke across the sky. Spectrographs taste this light. They spread the glow into colors, then into finer lines, searching for the fingerprints of simple molecules. Sodium may whisper here, cyanogen there, water ice turning to vapor under the sun's gentle push. The patterns are quiet but clear. This is a comet dust and ice warmed by sunlight, releasing a luminous haze. It is not an asteroid, which is mostly rock and metal and usually shows no halo. It is not a meteor, which is a brief streak when a grain of space dust burns in the air. A comet keeps company with the night, lingering, drifting, turning. An ancient traveler moves with calm purpose as the data gather. A second story begins, a story not of light, but of breath. The sun gives off a stream of tiny particles called the solar wind. It moves through the solar system like an invisible breeze. When that breeze passes the comet, it forms wakes and waves. Instruments listening to this wind delicate detectors on satellites or Earth-based arrays sensing how radio signals shimmer notice a faint repeating anomaly. It is small, almost hidden, the kind of thing a tired person might miss. It sounds, in curves and graphs, like a reply carried on starlight. Not words, not music, but a gentle, rhythmic flutter that seems to come and go with the comet's turning. If you are listening as you drift towards sleep, that is why these stories exist. Subscribe and share where you are and what time it is. I read them: New York at midnight, London before dawn, Sydney at noon like stars across the earth. Each one a tiny beacon answering back to the night. Inside observatories, red lights keep rooms dim so eyes stay night adjusted. Monitors show wide images with the comet as a small blur. Then, tighter frames reveal the coma edged by darkness. Photometers measure its brightness over hours. Spectrographs record quiet bands like rungs on a ladder. Technicians speak softly, not to be dramatic, but because the work draws you into a hush. The telescope hears by gathering light, then turning that light into signals. Those signals, handled carefully, let people read the sky. Even radio telescopes, listening to distant noise, can sense when the solar wind shifts. Combined, these tools make a kind of orchestra for the senses. Sight that reaches beyond sight. Hearing that is really the weighing of patterns. The narration in your mind slows to a bedtime rhythm. A comet is a small nucleus dust and ice, fragile as old snow and a wide glowing veil that sunlight pulls into shape. Its orbit is the path it follows around the sun. The path curves closer at a point called perihelion, then bends away again. Gravity draws the line. Light paints it. The comet's tail points mostly away from the sun, not directly behind its motion, because the solar wind presses outward. So the tail can look like it is leading or wrapping, a banner touched by an unseen current. All of this is normal and timeless. Comets have written these letters across the sky since before any city had a name. Yet the anomaly remains. It is not a loud effect. There is no sudden spike, no alarm. It is a repeating flutter, a small measured variation that appears when the wind tightens and eases when the wind relaxes. It returns in similar phases, as if tied to the comet's slow spin. Picture a paper pinwheel in a barely there breeze. Sometimes it turns, sometimes it hesitates, and in that hesitation, you might feel a rhythm. Scientists know rhythms can be found in many places. In the pulse of distant pulsars, in the hum of electricity, in the interference of signals crossing the air. Here, the rhythm seems married to the comet's own behavior and to the sun's breath. That marriage is where curiosity grows. The watchers compare notes. They subtract noise, the hum of instruments, the flicker of electronics, the small leaps. That temperature and weather add to any data set. What is left floats like a thin thread. It is narrow, then broad, then narrow again. It shifts by a heartbeat when the wake behind the comet aligns with the wind. If you turn the numbers into a picture, it looks like a woven ribbon, faint but consistent. No one says message. No one says code. They say pattern, and they say correlation, and they say we should keep listening. The quiet confidence in those words is its own comfort. It means the mystery is being held gently. On the ground, a child with a small telescope tries to find the glow. A parent points to a chart, traces stars, counts 3 to the left, 2 down. There, they whisper. That's much. The child waits, then begins to see it. A drifting shadow that is not a shadow at all, but a soft glow against the deeper dark. The moment locks into memory. Somewhere else, a nurse on a night break leans back against the wall, looks out past the hospital lamps, and wonders if the faint light is truly there, or if tired eyes are inventing it. Either way, the feeling is the same. A small warmth in the chest. Awe that rises without hurry. Experts sketch differences in simple language. A comet wears a veil. An asteroid does not. A meteor is a quick ember in the air. A comet is a lantern far away. Orbit means path. Trajectory means direction and speed along that path. Perihelion is the near turn. Spectrograph means color unbraided into stripes we can read. Telescope means a bucket for light, bigger than any eye could be. Solar wind is a stream, invisible, but steady, that shapes the veil like a hand shaping smoke. These terms rest like smooth stones, each with a purpose, each placed to make a walkway through the unknown. As the comet glides, time takes on a slow texture. Not the busy time of alarms and messages, but the spacious time that belongs to oceans and forests and night skies. The glow changes gently. Brightness rises and falls. The tail bends, sometimes faint, sometimes more defined, depending on the angle and the wind. Instruments record the flutter. The pattern is not strong, but it is patient. Patterns that are patient deserve patience in return. So the observers continue, night after night, taking care to do simple things well. The same settings, the same cadences, the same comparisons. Repetition becomes a kind of lullaby for the work. If the comet is a messenger, what is it saying? Perhaps nothing beyond its own nature. An apple falls and tells gravity. A breeze moves a leaf and tells the air. A comet sheds dust and tells sunlight and wind. To hear that telling is not to translate language, but to feel structure. The mind, built to find shapes and rhythms, leans closer. It is possible to go too far, to make faces in clouds. It is also possible to go not far enough, to miss the river while staring at a stone. Between those errors lies a gentle path. Look, measure, rest, and look again. Even as the measurements continue, life around the observatories moves in ordinary loops. Someone refills a kettle. Someone sends a note about calibration. A door sighs open to the night, and cold air flows in with a clean, metallic smell. In that air, the night creatures stir moths in cones of red light, distant coyotes, a rustle in dry grass. The dome above turns with a whispering gear, tracking the sky's motion. Beneath it all, the instruments keep their vigil, catching photons that left the sun minutes ago, or left a star years ago, or left a nebula when a child's grandparents were children. The past and the present are braided in the beam. The comet's presence changes how people breathe. Walkers slow down and look up. A guard on a late shift sends a simple message to a friend. Look east. A small community forms without names or meetings, just a chain of eyes and quiet hearts linked by the same soft glow. Awe does not demand loud feelings. It asks for room. The room is here. A high ceiling of darkness, a faint spark moving with a steadiness that feels like care. Wonder is not complicated. It is as simple as attention that keeps returning, as simple as choosing to step out into the night for a few more minutes before sleep. Sooner or later, every watcher frames the same question. If this flutter is only physics, why does it feel like a reply? The calm answer is kind. Things can echo without intention. A canyon repeats your call, not because it understands you, but because it honors shape and time. The solar wind is the canyon. The comet, the voice, the instruments, the ear. And still, there is a sweetness in the sensation of being answered. Even if the universe is only showing how it moves, the motion speaks to a human wish to not be alone under the wide, dark roof. The night grows deeper. The pale stroke across the sky thins, then brightens again, then fades in the city glow. Windows darken one by one. The last notes of day fall away like petals. Somewhere, a chart is saved and a lamp is turned off. The comet keeps its pace, and the wind keeps breathing, and the instruments keep their patient watch. The whisper is still there, small, steady, almost shy, threaded through numbers, tucked into graphs, hovering at the edge of hearing. The glow folds back into the horizon. The silence deepens, yet hidden in that silence is something waiting to be understood. The night is quiet, enough to hear your own breath. Above that quiet, a soft glow moves a drifting shadow with a pale, blue-white edge, like frost on glass. 3-1 ATLAs slides across the constellations, not circling, not returning, only passing through. Telescopes on mountains and deserts turn as one, following its trajectory. Computers hum, graphs fill with points of light. And in these points sits a truth both simple and strange. The path is open. No loop, no second lap around the sun. Just a long curve that never closes. The mark of an ancient traveler that does not belong to our family of worlds. The orbit is drawn with calm hands. Observers know its speed too fast for a native comet, fast enough to be interstellar. Stars have their own seas, and this object has sailed them. Gravity bends its way, but cannot hold it. The curve narrows near the sun, then relaxes again as it leaves like a bow pulled and released. In the language of space, this is a hyperbolic arc, an open door that will not shut. Children once asked if comets were omens. Scientists ask cleaner questions now, but the wonder is the same. What does it carry? And what does it change simply by passing? Under magnified eyes, the coma blooms an atmosphere around the nucleus, built from ice that warms and lifts away. It looks like breath in winter air, a gentle veil that fades at the edges. The tail is a brushstroke, thin and disciplined by the solar wind. Dust grains drift back, tiny mirrors catching sunlight, making a shimmering ribbon. Beyond the dust tail, another shape appears if you know how to look. An anti-tail, a hidden geometry that seems to point the wrong way. It's a trick of perspective and orbit, a careful balance of where Earth stands and how the ancient traveler moves. To watch it glide is to feel how still you are and how much the sky is not. Perihelion comes closest approach to the sun. The word is soft in the mouth, and the idea is softer still. A visitor drawn near by warmth and gravity, then released to the wide cold. Near this point, the sun's light grows fierce. The comet's skin cracks and jets turn on. Gas streams from vents like breath from a sleeping animal, forming spirals and fans that cameras trace frame by frame. Each turn of the nucleus writes a pattern in the surrounding haze. It is a silent dance, practiced for ages, repeated once here where we can see it dot at the observatories. The work is patient. A telescope is not a single eye but many mirrors, sensors, instruments in careful course. Spectrographs spread starlight into bands looking for fingerprints. Sodium soft glow, cyanogen's narrow lines, the faint color of dust. The team speaks in calm voices. They check every assumption twice. If the light wobbles, they ask who bumped the table. If a line is strong one night and weak the next, they ask if clouds did the trick. The story is not only told by the comet. It is told by everything between the comet and here dot in the data. There's a tremor weak, rhythmic, nested in the background hiss of the solar wind. It doesn't shout. It barely rises. But it's there often enough to make careful people sit up a little straighter. The anomaly is not a voice, not a code. It's a flutter, like a flag catching a breeze at a steady interval. Instruments compare it to the ticking of pulsars, whose beams sweep with clock-like precision. It is not that. They test it against radio noise from Earth, against satellites flickering in their own orbits, against the tender coughs of distant storms on the sun. None of these patterns quite fit. The maps update. The trajectory sharpens. Small errors shrink. As the comet leans past perihelion and begins its outward slide, the flutter steadies, still faint, still shy, but more regular than before. The team does not rush to name it. You can feel the weight of their restraint. In science, caution is a kind of love. The data is cradled, not squeezed. They document the timing, check the clock, check the pointing, check the weather, check their own instincts. They build a clean baseline, what the sky looks like when nothing unusual happens, so they can see the unusual as it is dot to explain what is seen. The narration shifts to the sun itself, because everything in this part of space is written in the sun's hand. The solar wind is a river of particles flowing outward, protons, electrons, and magnetic fields braided together. It presses on comets and tails. It polishes the dust until it shines. It turns thin gas into long streamers that stretch for millions of miles. Sometimes that wind is gentle, a breeze across a quiet lake. Sometimes a coronal mass ejection surges outward, a gust that makes everything shiver. The comet moves through these currents as a boat moves through waves, lifting and dipping, leaving swirls behind dot in that river. Charged dust can do surprising things. Grains rotate, clumps form and break apart. Jets switch on and off with sunlight like lighthouses waking at dusk. If a jet is angled off-center, it can make the nucleus precesses, a slow turning that changes how the coma is painted on the sky. And if the dust is fine enough and the field lines catch it just right, you can get a pulsation, not a sound, but a repeating shift in how ions glow or how dust shines. That kind of heartbeat would not be language, but it could be rhythm. It could read his intent to ears that want a story. The viewers at home need no equations for this. They see a pale blossom and a tail that seems to point them toward morning. They hear the calm voice explain how an anti-tail is only geometry, how interstellar speed means this was never bound to our sun, how gravity bends but does not trap. They picture a fortress around the sun, a fortress not made of stone, but of charged particles and invisible lines, and ask how a messenger crosses it without losing its balance. The answer, for now, is that the messenger is not untouched. It is shaped. The flutter is not a shield. It is a footprint dot in the control room. Red lights keep night vision intact. A pencil taps once, twice, then stops. A researcher tilts their head, listening not with ears but with the eyes that read plots. Data streams in, slow but steady, and the sensation is like sitting on a quiet beach, hearing the very first hint of a tide returning. The flutter rises when a modest jet faces the wind. It weakens when the jet rotates away. There's a lag, small, stubborn, consistent, as if the comet's response follows the push a moment later than expected. The lag is a clue and a question. In the soft logic of physics, delays often mean memory. Memory in this sense is not thought. It is the way a system holds its state. Dust holds charge. Ions hold direction. A jet heats and cools. The coma thickens and thins. Each of these changes takes time. Time makes rhythm possible. Rhythm makes patterns. And patterns are what human minds are built to notice, even when the patterns arise from nothing but the way the world breathes. If the anomaly is a reply, it is a reply from matter to sunlight, from ice to warmth, from drift to push. The camera turns outward to the comet's long road. Long before it reached our sun, it wandered near other stars, past broken belts of rock and ice, through clouds where nebulae glow faintly like distant cities at night. Its nucleus carries that history the way a stone carries a river's smoothness. No one knows which exoplanet systems it once passed. No one knows what supernova whispers might have brushed it, or what black hole tides might have tugged its path by a fraction of a fraction. But the open orbit tells the larger story. This is a guess from the far rooms of the galaxy, on a visit that will not repeat. The sense of scale is sleep-friendly when told gently. Imagine holding a single grain of sugar. Now picture that grain, traveling through a cathedral of darkness larger than any map, guided by forces that never touch it, only show it which way is easier to go. Our telescopes do not seize the grain. They only watch it shine. Our graphs do not command the flutter. They only trace where it rises and falls. In that humility, there is peace. The visitor owes us nothing, yet we learn simply by paying attention. Near. Gone. The glow slides toward the horizon. The anti-tail thins and disappears to all but the sharpest eyes. The dust tail becomes a thread. The coma looks like breath again, then like a rumor. The instruments keep working, but the watchers step outside for a minute to see the sky with nothing between. Cold air. The scent of rock and old wood. A bird calling once from somewhere near the parking lot. Overhead, the stars dim in the first. Hooray! The comet is still there. You know it by the way your eyes want to rest where it was a minute ago. Does a messenger need words to be heard? Perhaps not. It only needs a path, and it has one. A forbidden pattern that does not return. A brushstroke that will keep going long after we look away. The faint rhythm in the solar wind is a reminder that even silence can have structure, that even a cradle of silence can rock on hidden tides. And as the last camera shutters click and the logs are saved, the soft question remains like a fingerprint on glass. What part of this quiet, steady echo belongs to the traveler, and what part belongs to us, learning how to listen? The desert cools as the last daylight drains from the mesas, and the observatory wakes in red. Inside the dome, lamps are dimmed to a hush, casting soft halos over steel rails and cables. Coffee steams in paper cups. A chair rolls, a keyboard clicks, and the great white telescope lifts its face toward the first bright star, as if taking a slow breath. Out on the horizon, heat stored in stone escapes into the cradle of silence. You can almost hear it, the night settling, the instruments listening, the sky becoming a room where even small whispers carry. The crew moves with the calm rhythm of practice. Focus, guide, align. Motors hum like distant bees. A hand turns a collimation knob by half a degree. A thin rectangle of starlight sharpens on a monitor and then disappears into code. Tracking locks. The telescope slews along a careful trajectory. A bright point just off-center. The ancient traveler people now call 3-eye Atlas. It is not loud. It does not flare like a meteor or scratch the dark with a sudden blade of light. It is a drifting shadow in the endless night, an almost shy smudge that brightens a little, then dims, as if remembering to breathe. Cameras begin to stack images. Exposure after exposure building a quiet tower of time. Pixels gather the soft glow of dust. The coma looks like a gentle veil around a seed, a halo more felt than seen. Each new frame slips into the last and deepens it, as if a painter were laying translucent strokes over a single brush line across the sky. On a side monitor, numbers stream in tidy columns, counts, temperatures, wind, humidity. The desert wind tonight is patient. Seeing is steady. The world makes room for careful work. In the spectrograph room, a slit of night feeds a rainbow to a sensor. The spectrum rolls like a silk ribbon, subtle and pale. Sodium lines sit where they are expected, quiet beacons in a coated landscape. Other dust signatures rise like low hills. This is the language the spectrograph understands. Not words, but places where light prefers to stand. It is a kind of map one. That tells you something about what the traveler carries and how the sun's touch is loosening it into space. A scientist notes the line strengths without drama, then takes a sip of coffee gone warm. What matters most tonight is not the colors, but the cadence. On another screen, a filtered stream of measurements ticks onward. Fluctuations in the faint environment around the comet. A shimmer at the edge of measure that seems to rise and fall with a slow pulse. It is not loud. It is not a voice. It is a pattern, barely stronger than the hush around it, riding the solar wind like a leaf in a slow river. Every few minutes, the curve tightens, then relaxes, as if some hidden hand were tapping the surface of the flow. Data first, dream second. The motto is unspoken, but it lives in the way the crew moves. They test the obvious sources of interference. Weather? The log says clear. The all-sky camera agrees, its fisheye view an ink bowl pricked with pinpoints. Ground vibration? The seismometer is idle. No trucks on the service road. Power line noise? Stable. Local equipment? A microwave in the break room sits cold and unplugged. A cell phone is left in a drawer. A technician slips on a jacket and steps onto the catwalk to listen to the wind with his skin. He returns with dust on his sleeves and a simple nod. Nothing strange. Satellites are next. A screen fills with dotted trails, predicted passes of bright machines that cross the constellations with clockwork intent. The schedule shows brief glints. We'll graze the field in 20 minutes and again in an hour. The pattern on the monitor does not wait for them and does not flinch when they come. Airplanes are checked too, though planes tell on themselves. Strobes, transponders, the impatient motion of human travel. The curve on the screen keeps its pace like a sleeper's breathing. A plot is saved. Another begins. The room stays careful. Scientist pulls up comparison files from previous night's control frames from blank stretches of sky. Dark frames taken with the shutter closed. Flats recorded at dusk. The cadence is absent there. It lives only when 3 IATLA fills the slit. Only when the light is dusted by the traveler's own haze. Even then, it is modest, almost shy, and yet it holds. The word anomaly is not spoken out loud, but it tiptoes around the room anyway, keeping company with another word no one uses yet. Messenger. Outside, the telescope tracks and breathes. The dome rotates with a sound like a page turning. High above, the comet slides against a river of particles streaming from the sun. The solar wind is invisible, but its work is not. It combs the tail into a long brushstroke. It lifts faint, ions into a thread of silver that would be visible to human eyes if this place were darker still. The comet's own slow spin and small jets give the halo tiny asymmetries. A little more dust here, a little less there, like a scarf caught in a breeze and twisting as it falls. The pattern on the screen answers to some of that, but not all. When the wind stiffens, the flutter tightens. When the wind softens, it relaxes. Yet it lags the comet's rotation by a few patient beats, as if listening, then echoing. The team marks the offset and watches it hold for hours. They do not call it signal. A signal implies a sender. This is better named a shape, a habit the environment has learned, a rhythm the traveler and the wind make together unplanned, but not random. Someone suggests ground tests when the sun returns. A lab chamber, a dry haze of grains chilled and charged, a small ion stream to imitate the wind. Another reminds them of the thin boundary between noise and order, how easily a brain can be fooled by patterns it expects to find. A third, older voice answers that caution is the work, but so is wonder. They remember other nights, other harbingers faster. Objects, colder ones, flares that were only reflections from a forgotten panel drifting between worlds. The dome has seen many messengers and many mistakes. It has learned to love both. Midnight slides toward morning. The crew changes sitting positions but not tempo. Someone's notebook accumulates small sketches of curves and arrows. Someone else writes 3 words in the margin: data, patience, kindness. If the universe is a teacher, it does not rush. The comet brightens by a fraction and dims again. A faint gust rattles the high louvers. The control room warmth feels larger than the heaters can account for, as if the human circle itself gives off a little starlight. Later, they tilt the spectrograph to recheck the sodium beacons. Still there, still quiet. The dust signatures are calm hills. No sudden spikes, no dramatic fractures, only the steady geography of a body letting go of what the cold kept. The cadence, though, there it is again. A new algorithm tries to tease apart the overlapping influences: rotation, jet angle, wind speed. In the plot's thin lines, the team sees something like a braided river. Strands that separate, cross, and rejoin. Where they braid, the flutter is strongest. Where they loosen, it fades not away, but into the background where quiet things wait. They turn to redundancy. Another instrument in another building across the ridge is given the target. Half a world away, a partner observatory agrees to take a series just before dawn. If the cadence lives in the data from far apart places, their confidence will grow by an inch. If it doesn't, they will learn that too, and no hearts will break. That is the promise they made to themselves when they chose this work. To stand in awe without abandoning clarity, to hold hope without gripping it too tight. For a moment, each person in the room looks up from their screen, as if by the same thought. The dome shutter outlines a slice of stars. The Milky Way has lifted its pale river higher, a nebula here, a cluster there. The soft smear of a galaxy too far to name with the naked eye. All of it feels fragile and timeless at once. In this thin air, the sky can seem close, like a cathedral. Ceiling you could touch if you dared. A whisper moves through the group that is not speech, a quiet agreement to keep listening. The error bars shrink as the night nears its end. The cadence is still not a voice, still not a message, but it has become a character in the room. A presence that people register the way they registered the hum of the air system or the soft click of a relay behind the wall. It does not ask for belief, it just persists. Perhaps that is why it feels important, because persistence is the closest thing to intention that nature can show without speaking. When the first line of gray appears in the east, the telescope lowers a few degrees as if bowing to a closing curtain. Logs are saved, backups copied to places designed not to forget. A last frame is exposed, and then another, insurance against a momentary blink. The dome rotates home. Someone finally laughs at a small joke about the coffee, and the sound is gentle, tired, grateful. Outside, the desert smells like dust and cold metal. They step into the morning with their questions intact. Interference was tested and found blameless. Weather stayed honest. Satellites came and went with no sway over the curve. The cadence's patience matched the comet's own. What they have is modest but real. A faint, curious rhythm that sits not on top of the starlight, but inside the way it arrives. Not a transmission, perhaps. Not a reply sent to Earth, but something that behaves as if the traveler and the wind could learn a shared song. The day crew will comb the files and sharpen the methods. Someone will propose a new filter. Someone else will argue for a slower one. There will be charts and short walks and the kind of silence that belongs to thinking. And when the sun falls again and red lights bloom inside the dome, the night shift will take their seats in the same warm circle, hands hovering over the same keys, eyes adjusting to the same soft glow. For now, the desert widens into daylight, and the dome closes like an eyelid. The comet keeps going whether anyone watches or not. The wind continues its long, invisible journey. In the control room, screens go dark one by one, leaving the faint reflection of the observers themselves, small figures framed by glass and steel. They look like shadows inside a larger shadow, and for a heartbeat, they are part of the night. They just measured. What did the instruments hear? A pattern, patient and spare. What did the people hear? A kind of kindness in the way the universe repeats itself until we notice. The difference matters, but tonight it feels like a bridge, not a wall. The data will decide what is physics and what is wishful. Until then, the quiet holds. The traveler fades toward the west. And somewhere in that drifting quiet, where numbers meet wonder, a small question stays awake, waiting to be understood. A faint glow crosses the night like a careful brushstroke, and for a moment the sky feels alive with travelers. Some pass quietly and never return. Others leave questions that last for years. In this calm darkness, the narrator brings three names to the edge of your imagination. Almoa, Borisov, and 3I Li TL, an ancient traveler without a passport, each following a trajectory that does not bend back toward the sun. There, paths are open, not closed, like doors left ajar to the deep between the stars. You can almost hear a soft rustle, a cosmic whisper that says, "Watch closely, the pattern matters." Amuama came first, a harbinger that did not behave like a classic comet. No soft veil, no visible coma. Telescopes captured a tumbling shard, with changing brightness as if long and thin, spinning like a baton. Its light curve rose and fell in sharp, uneven beats, and astronomers read those beats like lines on a heart monitor. Shape, after all, reveals itself in the way light scatters. Here, the message was simple yet unsettling. Not round, not steady, and already leaving. It felt like a note slipped under Earth's door brief, unexplained, unforgettable. Borisov followed, and the world relaxed a little. This one looked like a comet shed icy, venting, wrapped in a luminous haze. A bluish coma formed. A pale tail stretched away from the sun. The spectrograph tasted common gases. Its light curve pulsed gently as jets turned on and off, a familiar rhythm in the cradle of silence. If Alma asked the hard question, what else is out there? Borisov seemed to answer, something very ordinary, simply from very far away. Wonder warmed into comfort. The stars kept their distance, but their stories felt friendly to Dodd. Then telescopes began to whisper another name. 3IATLAs, at first glance. It wore the clothes of a normal comet dust. Gas, a soft glow, the delicate shimmer of grains pushed by the solar wind. Yet inside its calm dance, observers logged an unusual cadence, a repeating flutter that did not match the usual noise. Not a voice, not language, only a pattern that appeared and faded, strengthened and slackened, as though nature itself had found a quiet, steady drum. Familiar dust, unfamiliar rhythm, that was the mood that settled over the domes. How do we know any of this? The method is slow and patient. Night after night, telescopes mark positions against the star field. Each dot is recorded with time, like footprints on a map. With 3 points, one can sketch a path. With dozens, one can fit a trajectory. Mathematically, an orbit is a promise written in numbers, and interstellar visitors keep a different promise. Instead of looping ellipses, their paths stretch into hyperbolas, curves that do not close, lines that do not return. The solution emerges from least squares fits, from careful corrections for pressure, sunlight, and wind. Bit by bit, the trajectory says, I came from away. I am going away again. Dot-like curves add shape to place. When a traveler tumbles, the sunlit area changes and the brightness flickers. A long body swings brightness like a lighthouse beam. A round body glows more steadily. Jets can tilt the curve, softening or sharpening the pulse. Telescopes see this rise and fall and turn it into a sketch without lines, only numbers and time. For Oumuamua, the swift tumble wrote a spiky script. For Borisov, the script calmed to a gentle wave. For 3IATLAS, there is the wave and faintly. Beneath it, a second rhythm nested like a hidden harmony. Astronomers speak softly about origins. They imagine an interstellar corridor, not a road but a probability paths that bring wanderers from far-off reservoirs of ice and stone. In some models, stars traveling together in loose associations shed debris into shared space, and gravity funnels some of that debris toward our sun. Picture the blurred edge of a galaxy cluster as a distant backdrop. Picture neighborhood stars stirring the medium like spoons in a cosmic lake. Now imagine a small shard set loose long ago, drifting shadow after drifting shadow, until it slips across our sky for a single season of human watching. The language for this is gentle and exact. Starlight, spectrograph, solar wind. A spectrograph spreads the comet's glow into a faint rainbow. Tiny spikes reveal sodium, cyanogen, and the breath of dust. A curve of brightness reveals rotation. A shift in the curve hints at jets. The solar wind-charged particles flowing outward pushes dust into tails and wakes. In these measurements, scientists find a balance between awe and proof. They do not chase prophecies. They test for interference. They compare nights. They map errors. And still, in the case of 3IATLAS, the narrow flutter keeps returning. If Oumuamua asked questions and Borisov offered comfort, 3I feels like a quiet messenger. It does not shout. It simply persists. The pattern could be simple physics hidden in plain sight. When grains charge and align in a magnetic field, when jets pulse against the wind, when rotation lines up with sunlight, just so, a repeating structure can appear. A natural metronome may tick in the tail's luminous haze. The rhythm may be nothing more than dust singing softly to the breeze. And yet, even as this explanation settles the mind, the heart lingers on the wonder. Why so steady? And why here? No one claims meaning. The discipline remains tender but firm. Still, late at night, when the control room grows quiet and the screens hum, it is hard not to feel the room breathing with the sky. You too can feel it as you listen. The cradle of silence holding a pattern you can almost count. A gentle veil drapes the scene. The comet glides on its cosmic dance. The numbers fill their tables. The data turn into plots. The plots turn into a story that is careful, modest, and strangely beautiful. The story also protects space for uncertainty. Alma kept its secrets and faded into memory. Borisov gave us the comfort of the known and moved on. 31CLS arrives, with both familiar dust and unfamiliar flutter. The narrator reminds you that science grows by finding anomalies and asking whether they are truly new or merely new to us. Sometimes the hidden thing is a mistake, and the pattern dissolves with better calibration. Sometimes the hidden thing is real, and the night gains another thread. There is also the human part, the feeling of standing at the window of a dark house, looking at a sky that goes on without end. Travelers come and go. We chart them, name them, and let them pass. Their presence lightens the weight of our smallness. A comet is a fragile object, yet it carries timeless distances. It leaves a line of memory behind it, like chalk on a blackboard, like a dream that refuses to fade after waking. Even when the glow is gone, the question remains, what set this traveler on its way? Perhaps there is an interstellar corridor, perhaps only chance. Perhaps a blurred edge of a distant cluster once nudged a handful of stones, and those stones drifted until one finally came within our sight. We do not need certainty to feel hope. The act of listening is already a kind of answer. And so, while the numbers work in the background, the camera returns to the sky. Soft glow, drifting shadow, the gentle pull of the sun shaping a path that will not close. In this calm place, the comparisons settle like snow. Alma the harbinger, Borisov the familiar, 3-1, ATLA's the messenger with a quiet drum. Each shows a different face of the same vast story, how small objects can carry great distances, and how those distances become part of us when we pay attention. The night accepts them all. The wind keeps moving. The stars keep their patient time. By the time the chapter draws down, the travelers have already receded a little, as all travelers do. Instruments keep watch. Plots update. The flutter rides the data like a faint echo traveling across water. The narrator's voice softens. The mystery is not loud. It is gentle, like the hush that follows a lullaby. In the darkness, the question hangs without pressing for an answer. Could this quiet reply be physics we have not yet named, waiting to be understood? The glow fades a degree, and in that fading, the silence deepened. Yet hidden in that silence was something waiting to be understood. A quiet hum hangs over the control room like the last note of a lullaby. Screens rest in dim blues and soft grays. Outside, the dome breathes with the night, opening a round eye to starlight. Inside, engineers and astronomers lean close to numbers that look like snow pixels, dots, faint brush strokes across the sky. The comet moves on its long, open trajectory, an ancient traveler gliding through the sun's light. But in the data, something wavers and returns, like a small bird tapping on a window in a steady, almost polite rhythm. It is not a voice. It is not a word. It is a pattern. They begin gently, as if waking a sleeping animal. The first step is a Fourier transform, a way to turn time into tone, like pressing your ear to a piano and hearing each string separately. The series rolls forward. Peaks rise from the noise, thin as reeds. Then windowed spectrograms little, sliding frames that watch the tune change as the moments pass. Color maps bloom, narrow lines, then bands, and lines again. A flutter that tightens and loosens as though a breeze skims the surface of a lake and then rests. Noise models come next. They test the hiss of electronics, the slow drift of temperature, the tick of a motor that turns the telescope by tiny steps. They pull out the hum of power supplies and the faint heartbeat of the building itself. Each subtraction is like lifting a veil. The room grows quieter. What remains is lean and precise, a slim blade of energy that grows wide, then thin, synchronized to nothing they expect. Outside the dome, the comet turns into morning's pale idea and then returns to evening's soft glow. but the pattern stays. When the solar wind stiffens, the band broadens, as if dust grains are being pushed into a wider choir. When the wind relaxes, the band narrows to a single on-key whisper, narrowband, then broad, then narrow again. The timing feels tied to the sun's mood, to perihelion wind and magnetic lines draped like invisible strings. Yet the rhythm holds an offset the models cannot dismiss. They turn to the known metronomes of the sky. Pulsars, those lighthouse stars, beat at astonishing precision. The team lays the comet's flutter beside a catalog of pulsar ticks. The result? No match. Pulsars throb with hard-edged regularity, crisp and mechanical. This is softer, smeared. At the edges, as if made by frost and breath and the slow tumbling of light dust. Then they test the hiss of a supernova remnant broadband noise shaped by shock fronts and tangled fields. Too wide, too rough, too stormy. The comet's line is a reed pipe beside a hurricane. The language stays gentle and clear on the whiteboard. One axis is frequency, the other time. The color bar shows intensity. A thread of brightness climbs and falls, a drifting shadow of tone above the cradle of silence. If it were random, it would wander. If it were an artifact, it would cling to the instrument. Instead, it follows the comet, yet not exactly. It leads sometimes, then lags, then returns to a place just shy of alignment, like a dancer half a step behind the drum. They bring in rotation data. The comet spins with a measured period, not too fast, not too slow, casting jets that pulse as faces turn sunward. The flutter correlates with that spin. Every time the same side turns, the pattern grows clear, a soft glow in the plot. Yet not perfectly. The crest arrives late by a few degrees, like an echo from the back wall of a long hall. Phase-locked, the notes say. Phase-locked, but lagging. The words feel like a riddle told in the calmest voice in the room. So they ask a simple question. What sings? Dust, ice, ions. The sun, with its flowing river of particles, its magnetic curtains, its solar wind that rushes outward to brush everything it meets. Charged grains can align under fields, turning like tiny weather vanes. Jets can rise and fall, flicker, and pause. If charged grains align and misalign repeatedly, could they hum? Not with sound, but with the kind of energy a spectrograph can taste. The explanation feels possible, like a footbridge made of glass. It also feels improbable, like finding the same seashell pattern on different shores. The team splits their work like musicians learning parts. One group simulates dust dynamics in the ion tail. Grains of various sizes, charges, shapes, all caught. And the solar wind's invisible hands. Another group examines jet geometry offset plumes that act like rotating fountains, splashing ions into the breeze at a rhythm shaped by sunlight and shadow. A third group builds stricter noise models, because a quiet lie in data can mimic truth too well. They apply new windows to the spectrogram, shorter, longer, tapered at the edges. The flutter persists across methods, leaner than before, but still steady. There is a night when the wind rises. A coronal stream sweeps through. The instruments record a stiffer breeze, and the narrowband line swells. The room watches the color map deepen, the band unfolding like a ribbon. The lag remains, a few degrees, always those few degrees. The effect is tiny, uncomfortable, and beautiful. Like a clock that keeps perfect time, but insists on starting its chime just after the hour. Every time, without fail. They bring in metaphors to keep themselves awake and calm. The comet is a reed. The wind is breath. The magnetic field is a mouth shaping vowels. The flutter is a vowel held too long, softening and tightening with each turn of the tongue. But metaphors do not explain. They steady the hand while the math sharpens the line. On another whiteboard, someone draws a phase wheel. 0 degrees. Where the jet faces the sun, 90 at the side, 180 in shadow, 270 on the way back. The flutter's peak lands not at 0, not at 180, but always late in aftertaste, a delayed glint on the rim of a glass. They go hunting for artifacts again, because honesty demands that. They rotate the telescope off target and gather. Blank sky. The flutter vanishes. They aim at a different comet. Nothing similar appears. They swap receivers. The flutter follows the comet like a small moon. They change cadence, exposure lengths, integration windows. The line thins, thickens, and never breaks. A detail emerges on the edges, a faint harmonic, as though the dust choir occasionally climbs to a higher note, then returns, shy and reluctant. One engineer proposes surface charging on clumps of grains. In the jet, ragged aggregates spin, building charge in uneven patches. When they align with the wind, they discharge in microscopic arcs, not violent, but crisp, a tiny, repeating crackle that modulates the ion plume. Those micro arcs could rise in number when the jet faces the wind, then peak after, when a threshold is crossed. The lag would make sense. A few degrees later, like heat that glows after the fire has already been stoked. The room does not cheer. It exhales. The idea is testable. They craft a laboratory echo to mirror the sky. In a chilled chamber, under a gentle ion stream, powders shaped like comet dust lift and settle. Electrodes measure charge buildup. Small. Cameras catch spins. A spectrograph watches the faintest light. In slow motion, under the artificial solar wind, the grains align, then misalign, then align again. When a threshold is reached, minuscule sparks flare so faint, so brief, you could miss them if you blinked. The signal they make is narrow, then wider, then narrow again, as the stream changes speed. And in the timing, a lag appears. A few degrees. Always those few degrees. The team does not declare victory. They place the lab pattern and the comet pattern side by side, letting the resemblance speak in a whisper. Nature is complex. Coincidence is patient. But the echo is hard to ignore. Phase-locked flutter, correlated with rotation, lagging by degrees. Narrowband broadening under stronger wind. A faint harmonic that rises like a second voice in a choir. Dust can hum, it seems, when the conductor is close and the field is right. They compare the outcome again with the sky's clocks. Pulsars remain themselves iron strict and pure. The hiss of a supernova remains a storm. The comet's music sits between, neither clock nor storm, but a reed under steady breath. The feeling in the room shifts from omen to mechanism, from secret to structure, and yet the wonder does not fade. If the universe can produce a pattern that looks like a reply, isn't that, in its way, a kind of reply? Not sent to us, not aimed, but real and patient, waiting for any ear that knows how to listen. Someone turns down the lights. The spectrogram glows like a small nebula on the screen. In that luminous haze, the narrow line flows across a long night of data. Outside, the comet is only a drifting shadow by now, a pale filament over the horizon. Inside, a new model is written. Charge grains align in the jet. Microarcs modulate the ion flow. The solar wind carries that modulation, and instruments feel it as a ripple in the cradle of silence. The phase lag is the memory of the grains catching up to the field. A delayed obedience, a gentle hesitation. They do not pretend this is the whole story. The sun changes, the wind curls, the comet breathes. There will be nights when the flutter vanishes and nights when it returns brighter than before. There will be parameters to tune, assumptions to test, subtle edges where the model rubs thin. They treat those edges like shorelines on a dark sea, tracing them without hurry. The goal is not to force the pattern into certainty. The goal is to let the pattern teach them how soft a language physics can be done as the hour grows late, they export the final plots and save them twice. Someone yawns. Someone else writes a note in the log. Phase-locked flutter confirmed across. Methods, lag consistent. The words are small and careful. Still, there is a warmth under them, a quiet happiness that the sky has allowed a little more understanding tonight. Dot beyond the dome. The comet continues along its trajectory, untroubled, timeless, a messenger that may not know it carries anything at all. The solar wind keeps flowing, the invisible conductor of every nearby song. And in that patient river, a thin, repeating flutter drifts outward, a soft glow against endless night, neither silence nor speech, but something fragile between. A cosmic whisper that feels like meaning, even if it is only the world doing what it has always done. The screens dim, the room rests, and the question remains, light as dust in the air. If dust can hum, what else in the dark is already singing? Just beyond what we can hear. The sun does not speak with words. It speaks with motion and invisible. Breath that never stops. High above the quiet neighborhoods and dark fields, a river of particles streams outward in all directions. This is the solar wind. It wraps the planets, brushes the moons, and drapes long, delicate curtains of charged gas across space. When that wind meets an ancient traveler like a comet, the meeting is not violent. It is more like a steady breeze, crossing a field of reeds. Dust, ions, and magnetic lines sway, bend, and recover, each movement leaving a faint shimmer in the light dot as 3I Atlas nears perihelion, the closest point in its orbit to the sun. Its surface warms and loosens. Frozen gases lift away. Dust grains uncouple and drift. A soft glow swells into a luminous haze. Telescopes capture the change as a brightening coma and a tail stretched thin by the sun's steady push. Spectrographs taste the starlight that passes through this haze, drawing simple lines for sodium and cyanogen, hints of water breaking apart, and a hint of ions swept downwind. The comet does not roar. It exhales. Each exhale is caught by the wind and shaped into something slow, fragile, and strangely beautiful. Space weather guides this shaping. At the sun's surface, darker patches, coronal holes, open like quiet doorways in the hot atmosphere. From them, faster streams of particles race outward. Elsewhere, magnetic fields twist until they snap and coronal mass ejections. Great. Blossoms of solar material billow into space. None of this looks loud from so far away. Yet the effects are everywhere. Auroras that bloom at Earth's poles. Radio static that crackles along certain frequencies. And, around a comet, delicate changes in how dust and ions drift. When a fast stream catches a slow stream, a boundary forms and moves. The wind stiffens, then relaxes, and stiffens again. Observers notice something else riding inside this flow, a faint repeating flutter. It is not a voice. It is a cadence, a gentle tremor, like a violin string drawn with the lightest touch. Instruments run steady, sampling the wind with magnetometers and measuring brightness with precise timing. The pattern tightens when the wind grows strong, loosens when it calms, an almost musical response to shifting pressure and field. If someone asked what the flutter means, the clean answer would be, it means the wind is interacting with the comet's wake. But meaning is not why the ear keeps listening. The cadence is simply pleasant to hear. The comet's wake is a temporary fortress made of motion. As neutral gas leaves the nucleus, sunlight and particles strip electrons from some of those molecules, turning them into ions. Ions respond to magnetic fields. The solar wind carries its own interplanetary magnetic field, and when that field encounters the growing cloud, it wraps and slides, forming a magnetic tail. Inside that tail, ions can oscillate, wavefronts can steepen, and charged grains can align and misalign like tiny weather vanes. None of this is language. It is physics drawing patterns the way frost draws across a window, repeating, branching, mesmerizing dot. Picture it simply. The comet is a drifting shadow. The sun is a steady drum. The wind is the drumstick tapping the same rhythm across different textures. Over rough dust, the beat comes back grainy. Over iron-rich regions, it rings clearer. Coronal holes sharpen. The tempo, slow wind smudges it. From Earth's quiet nights, the observation seems to be a cosmic whisper, steady, calm, and slightly late. Late, because the response does not appear the instant the wind changes. There is a lag, a pause that does not vanish even when the instruments are corrected for distance and time of flight. The flutter waits a little, then answers. Why does it wait? One reason is inertia. Dust and ions do not leap to new positions the moment a gust arrives. They adjust. Another reason involves charging. Dust grains develop electric charges as photons, knock electrons free, and as electrons and ions land on their surfaces. The charge level shifts slowly, depending on size, shape, and composition. A grain that becomes more charged may spin faster or align more readily with the magnetic field. But that response must climb through microseconds, then milliseconds, then seconds, adding up across the thickening coma. Many small delays combine into one perceptible pause. The shape of the comet's activity contributes as well. Jets do not fire evenly across the surface. A sunny patch may warm and vent, turning like a lighthouse as the nucleus rotates. When that jet faces the wind, the wake structure changes. When it turns away, it relaxes. The rotation takes time. If a jet peaks slightly after the local noon of the comet's surface, then the wake's largest change lags behind the simple prediction that stronger wind equals immediate response. Even geometry builds a rhythm. The comet's trajectory tilts, the jet leans, the field lines thread across it all like harp strings plucked out of sync. Coronal mass ejections add their own delays. A CME does not arrive as a line. It arrives as a region, denser, hotter, often with rotated magnetic fields. Earth's instrument spacecraft sitting far from the comet watch as CME pass by and note the time stop. But the comet stands elsewhere along a different line of flow. The same structure reaches it at a different moment, and the internal rearrangements within the CME sheaths, cores, draped fields arrive in pieces, each asking the wake to retune. The result is a choreography that feels intentional only because it is smooth. Intention is often just continuity witnessed from far away, on the ground and in orbit. Teams translate the invisible into curves. A magnetometer trace rises and falls. A photometric signal brightens, softens, and brightens again. The data do not shout. They breathe. The solar wind speed increases, and the flutter grows tight, crisp, and high. The wind slows and the flutter widens, relaxed and low. Yet through the entire sequence, the delay persists, seconds turning into minutes. Perhaps more when the jet is misaligned or when dust concentration is high. Between cause and effect, space stores a little time, like a lung holding air between breaths. This is where the chapter's calm deepens. The narrator invites a simple image. Stand by a lake at dusk. Toss a pebble. The ripples move outward, bend around a reed, and then, a little later, the reed sighs against another, and both sway. The pebble did not touch the second reed. The water carried the news. In the same way, the sun's invisible hands touch the comet, and the comet touches its own wake, and the wake nods in proof. And only after that do our instruments feel a change. The world is often this way. Most things that move us do so after a pause. Spectrographs add color to the timing. Lines that trace ion behavior strengthen as the field sharpens, then trail off as the wake relaxes. Dust scattered light, measured. At different phase angles shows a shift in polarization that lags behind the wind's speed. Even the tail's shape, its gentle curve against the star field, records a delay. When the wind stiffens, the tail narrows and brightens. When it calms, the tail spreads like a soft veil. The narrowing happens soon. The full brightening takes longer, as new dust enters the flow and old dust redistributes. Nothing in space snaps. Everything eases into place. For someone listening in the small hours, the science settles like a blanket. Coronal holes, steady, faster streams. CMEs, large, temporary gusts. Magnetic lines, paths that guide charged particles. The comet's wake, a thin, shifting fortress that remembers what the wind did and answers in its own time. The flutter is a natural reply, a rhythm caused by pressure, charge, and rotation. It is a reminder that the universe can feel intentional without intending. That is not disappointing. It is comforting. If the cosmos is a dance, then we are watching two partners learn each other's steps. Still, the mind lingers on the lag. It is small, repeatable, and stubborn. It makes the pattern feel like a conversation, a call and response. The sun moves. The comet answers. The sun moves again. The comet waits, then answers differently. In that waiting lives a question that keeps the instruments on and the eyes soft. What exactly stores the time? Is it the charging of grains, the switching of jets, the folding of magnetic layers, or a hidden combination we have not yet separated? The answer may be simple. The answer may be elegant. The answer may be both. Night turns and the comet glides on, a drifting shadow carved by firelight it never touches. The river of particles continues its ancient run. Far from the cities, a telescope follows the tail's brushstroke and notes. Another gentle tightening of the flutter, as if the breeze has freshened a little across the field of reeds. There is no urgency in the sound, only steadiness. It is enough to make a listener feel less alone, held between a star that breathes and a traveler that remembers the breath. The cadence softens, then steadies, and the silence deepens. Yet, hidden in that silence is something waiting to be understood. In the quiet rooms where night feels permanent, machines hum like distant bees. The lights are low to protect the cameras. A thin frost clings to steel chambers, and every breath looks like a small cloud. Here, the sky is rebuilt piece by piece. Not with telescope mirrors or long exposures of starlight, but with powders, magnets, and invisible winds made by careful hands. The goal is simple to say and hard to do. Make a comet happen on a table, then ask it to speak. The chamber cools first. Inside, trays of mixed grains, crushed rock, glass spheres, and jagged dust settle into a pale bed like powdered snow. Their colors are dull to the eye, but they carry small secrets in their shapes. Some grains are round and smooth. Others look like tiny mountains, with edges that can snag a charge and hold it. The temperature drops until it matches the cold skin of an ancient traveler, far from the sun, before outgassing begins. Thin wires snake across the chamber like vines. A sensor watches for heat. Another watches for light. Then the magnets come on. They do not sing exactly. They thrum. The sound is steady and level, like a quiet engine behind a wall. A coil warms and a controlled flow of ions begins to move, an artificial solar wind. It is not the true wind we find in space, racing from the sun's surface at hundreds of kilometers per second, but it carries the same idea. A stream of charged particles that pushes, charges, and stirs. In this room, the wind is only a breath. That is enough. A camera peers through a window and zooms in until grains become boulders, until a pinch of dust becomes a landscape. At first, nothing happens. The bed is still. Then a few motes lift, hesitate, and settle again. Another gust. A patch of snow puffs up and falls in a slow drift. The movement is small, like a whisper across paper. But on the screen, the motion feels large, a gentle veil being lifted and laid back down. The researchers murmur to each other, there. Voices careful, as if a loud word could break the scene. They push the wind a little harder. Now the grains begin to turn. Round ones roll along the surface, bouncing like pebbles in shallow water. The jagged ones catch and twist and sometimes hop, as if a hand had flicked them from underneath. Static builds when rough edges rub. A microarc jumps white thin, almost not there. It looks like a needle of light drawn and erased in the same instant. Another needle follows, then another. On the audio feed, amplified beyond reason, there is a faint crackle. It arrives in beats, not steady but not random either, like sparks under a blanket. Spectrographs watch as well. Tiny fibers carry light to a dark box across the room, where it is split into a rainbow and measured. The emissions are faint, but real. A soft line appears where sodium glows. Another hints at molecules set loose by the arc. The team marks time and notes the wind strength. A pattern begins to form, not words, not code, but rhythm. The crackle repeats when the wind reaches a narrow window of speed, when the grains have built enough charge, when their edges face a certain way. If the wind is too weak, nothing. If it is too strong, chaos. Between those extremes, a flutter. They try different mixtures. Smoother grains lead to fewer arcs. Irregular fragments make the chamber sparkle with micro-lightning when the wind is right. Aggregate small clusters made by pressing powder together behave in a special way. They spin, not like neat tops, but like small impatient worlds. As they turn, charge pools on one side, then jumps. The jumps make more turning. The turning makes more jumps. With the wind's push, a feedback begins. The camera tracks a single clump as it dances in place, a drifting shadow on the pale bed, and it flutters in a time that is not the wind's and not the chamber's. It is its own. Someone dims the room by one more notch. The brightness on the monitor is raised to keep watch. Time stretches. In the hush, the flutter takes shape. It is never perfect. This is nature, not a clock. But it keeps returning, like waves that are not the same wave, yet follow the same shore. The researchers run a Fourier transform, turning the flicker into numbers. Peaks rise where the flutter repeats. Then the wind is shifted by a fraction, and the peaks move in step, as if the grains were listening. What if we scale it? Someone asks. Not with a voice of excitement, but with the calm voice of habit. Scale is the bridge between the laboratory and the sky. The comet's coma is a vast luminous haze. This chamber is a bowl the size of a helmet. In the real solar wind, the flow is stronger, the space is wider, and the dust is finer than any we grind here. But the forces are cousins. The math that ties them together is patient and precise. They calculate. They map the chamber's flutter to the size of a comet's gas and dust envelope. The feedback loops that appear in centimeters could, in space, stretch to kilometers. The microarcs that crackle like a warm radio could out there become sheets of charged grains lifting and settling along lines of magnetic force. The rhythm could ride those lines. It would not be a message sent by a mind. It would be a message revealed by conditions, like a hidden creek that appears when snow melts along a slope. The team writes, structured flutter possible under realistic solar wind and dust parameters. They turn to the comet's known behavior. In their notes, the words orbit and trajectory nestle beside wind speed and charge density. They think of the tail, a brushstroke across the sky, and the ion tail, thin as a silver thread pulled tight. They think of a small jet that turns on, and off as 3i Atlas rotates, the way a lighthouse beam swings past a coast. If the jet sends fresh grains into the wind at a certain phase, and if those grains carry certain shapes, Then the wind might pull the same trick the chamber has shown. A pulse that is not random, a pulse that returns. A second test begins. This time, they change the grain shapes while keeping the wind steady. They swap sharp with smooth, then mixed with layered. They add a dusting of salts that melt at low heat, as real comets do. The flutter appears and collapses, appears again, collapses again, and then strengthens when the mix hits a sweet spot. The spectrograph shows lines as faint as a memory, the kind you feel more than you see. The rhythm becomes clearer. If you were to lie down on the floor and close your eyes, the sound would feel like ocean surf 3 rooms away, constant yet moving, a lullaby made of physics that no one calls it a signal. They do not name it omen or prophecy or reply. They use words like correlation and stability range and phase lag. But more than one person stands by the window and looks into the dark glass, where the reflection floats over the cold chamber, and wonders if nature has been speaking like this the whole time through nebula curtains, through meteor showers, through the slow winds that cradle planets and exoplanet skies. Maybe the universe is full of rhythms that sound like intention because we are built to hear patterns and hold them. They test for frauds. They shut down nearby electronics. They ground the chamber differently. They muffle the magnets and reroute cables. The flutter holds. They introduce a fake. They play a clean tone through a hidden driver and watch the numbers. That tone is too perfect. It leaves fingerprints at harmonics no natural scene would make. The chamber's rhythm is not like that. It wavers, breathes, and bends with the wind as if tied to it by a flexible cord. It is neat enough to analyze and messy enough to believe. One researcher thinks of earlier visitors. Oumuamua, with its odd spin and no coma. Borisov, classic and fast, a narrow streak of ice and dust that acted as expected. 3-1, Atlas feels like a cousin to Borisov, but it carries this extra thing. A flutter that can be traced back to shapes and charge. In the grand picture, a comet is still a comet. It orbits, or rather, it passes through. It has no closed loop, only a path that cuts across our system and keeps going. It is a messenger, whether or not it intends to be one, because it brings conditions we can read if we listen. The team writes a draft. The language is careful. We demonstrate a repeatable wind-dependent microarc phenomenon in coal dust aggregates. We observe a narrow band of rhythmic emission that scales with particle geometry and ion flow. We propose that, under specific flow and grain conditions, a cometary coma may host a structured flutter detectable as a faint pattern superimposed on background noise. The words are clinical, but underneath them is a quiet feeling of wonder. To hold even a shadow of a comet in a steel bowl and hear it crackle is to step for a moment into the cradle of silence that lives between stars. Outside, the night is still there, wide and soft. The chapter of sky above the lab looks empty at a glance and then full of small motion if you keep looking. Somewhere beyond that roof, 3I-ATLA moves along its trajectory, the ancient traveler slipping through the sun's light. Instruments on Earth continue to listen. The chamber cools for the next run. Someone scribbles a note about adding a different grain size. Someone else sets a timer and stretches their shoulders, thinking of morning coffee and the calm thrill of another data set. If nature can sound like intention, how will anyone know the difference? Maybe the answer is not in a single test, but in a patient chorus of them, labs repeating, telescopes comparing, small truths stacking like careful stones. Meaning, in this work, is not a shout but a soft glow that refuses to go out. The flutter fades as the wind powers down. The magnets exhale their last faint thrum. The screens dim and the room returns to ordinary silence. Yet even in that silence, something lingers. It is not a word and not a number. It is a feeling like standing on a shore at dusk, hearing the ocean's long breath and sensing patterns beyond the ear's reach. The lab holds still. The chamber frosts over again, pale as moonlight. And in the drifting quiet, one could almost believe that a hidden rhythm waits, patient and timeless, for the next breath of wind to lift it back into song. A quiet hour settles over the world. Streetlights hum, windows breathe a thin frost, and above the roofs and fields, the sky opens like a slow curtain. Somewhere in that wide dark, an ancient traveler drifts. Its orbit is not a loop, but a long road, a trajectory cut from far away. Starlight touches it, and the touch returns as a soft glow. People feel it before they understand it. They lean closer to headphones, to backyard scopes, to tiny antennas wired by hand. They listen for the same thing, the faint repeating anomaly. That rides the wind of the sun like a thread of silver dot in Ohio. A nurse steps out after a late shift. The parking lot is still wet from snow that never quite formed. She sits in her old car with the heater low, a blanket on her lap, and a small radio balanced on the steering wheel. The screen glows pale green. A whisper in the noise rises, then rests. She thinks of how many heartbeats she has watched, how waveforms can hold warning and comfort at once. This, too, is a pattern. Not a voice, yet not empty. She closes her eyes and hears the flutter like someone tapping once every few breaths. Far away, outside Nairobi, a student resets the tripod in red light. The telescope is narrow but eager. It catches a brush stroke across the sky that wasn't there last month. The student records short exposures and stacks them, pulling a drifting shadow out of the dark. Clouds graze the horizon. Dogs bark once and then stop. Inside her notes, she writes simple words: coma faint, tail thin, anti-tail possible, solar wind steady. She learned these terms at school comet orbit telescope, but tonight they feel less like labels and more like doors. Dot on the edge of rural Australia. A retired raises a small Yagi antenna and screws it to a fence post while the air cools and the insects settle. He tuned radios when he was young, back when every spark could become a song. Now he listens to the sky. A home-built spectrograph on the table breaks noise into colors that look like rain. Most lines fall where they should. One thin line trembles. The tremble repeats. He smiles not because he knows what it means, but because it holds still long. Enough to be real. Across the map, in quiet corners, and on city rooftops, the same scene repeats with small differences. Kitchen tables become control rooms. Notebooks open next to cups of tea. Cell phones show sky charts. A parent in Manila leans by a window while a child sleeps in the next room. A fisherman near Valparaiso watches from the pier between tides. A librarian in Reykjavik props a phone against the sill and lets a long exposure drink the night. They are untrained and trained, curious and cautious, alone and somehow together. The comet does not know they are there. It simply moves, and the moving gathers them. The documentary voice remains calm. It explains without hurry. A comet is ice and dust, softened by sunlight. As it nears the sun, it sheds a gentle veil called a coma. The tail stretches away from the heat. An ion tail draws a finer line where charged particles escape. The solar wind light, fast, invisible, plays across these features like fingers on strings. Spectrographs taste the light and reveal simple signatures. Sodium and a faint edge, maybe cyanogen and a soft band. Nothing that sounds like a message, only physics doing what physics does. But in the noise there is an anomaly, a flutter that repeats with the comet's slow spin and with the wind's shifting hand. The Ohio nurse hears this and thinks of monitors in rooms where families whisper. She knows the difference between alarm and rhythm. She knows how a regular pattern can calm a room, She rests her forehead against the window glass and listens, feeling the car's metal frame hum like a large, simple bell. The lecture she once took about meteors, about asteroids and comets, and the difference between them, comes back in pieces. Meteors burn. Asteroids are rock. Comets carry long hair of ice. But this one carries something else, a steadiness that makes a long night feel shorter, as if the universe itself is breathing in time. The Nairobi student waits for the telescope to cool, then zooms in on a stack that shows a grainy arc. She draws a line on tracing paper and marks the path across the field. The numbers are crude but careful. She looks up and imagines the traveler as a messenger with no words, a harbinger with no warning, only a presence that keeps its own pace. She had studied nebulae and exoplanets in class, learned how telescopes pull faint light into meaning, how spectrographs scatter that light like salt. She wonders now if meaning must always be written, or if sometimes it can be felt like a wind. That changes temperature, and nothing else. In Australia, the retiree tests his ground wire and flexes cold fingers. The flutter strengthens for a minute, then fades to a faint echo. He clicks a button and adds a note about time and weather. Somewhere upwind the sun is quiet. Somewhere behind the earth, the magnetic field is adjusting like a slow, protective shield. He doesn't need a model of the heliosphere to picture it. He imagines a stream moving past a rock in a river. Vortices form and fade. The river tells the shape of the rock without ever seeing it. Perhaps the wind is telling the shape of this traveler in the same way. What spreads from one listener to the next is not certainty. It is softness, a kind of hope. In chat rooms and message boards, voices keep the tone gentle. People share plots without shouting. They note the difference between a pulsar's crisp beat and this tender, breath-like rise. They repeat the words they've learned: orbit, trajectory, telescope, spectrograph. The language becomes a bridge between strangers. It is less about being correct and more about being present under the same sky dot, if the anomaly is only dust responding. To a steady wind, it has still done something human. It has gathered those who might never meet. A nurse, a student, a retiree. 3 points in a living star map. Many more shine in the spaces between them. They mark their times in local clocks, midnight, dawn, noon, and together they make a chain around the planet. You can almost see it if you step back. Tiny lights in kitchens and cars and backyards, arranged like a constellation that no atlas has named yet. The narrator breathes with the pace of sleep. Facts glide in and settle. Earth turns. The comet continues on its long path, the tail a fine brush that paints in slow motion. The solar wind drapes around it and then lets go. The flutter returns and thins, returns and thins. Someone in Tokyo hears it stronger at lunchtime. Someone in Lisbon hears it after the rain. Someone in Winnipeg misses it entirely and smiles anyway, happy to know it passed. Now and then, a telescope catches a sharper image. A brighter jet flickers near the limb like a lighthouse. The pattern lines up, then lags, then lines up again, as if the traveler were turning a face we cannot see. It is not speech, it is not code, but it has a patience that feels like care. And when people describe it, they choose small, kind words. Hush, flutter, drift. Science and memory touch in these hours. A grandmother recalls a comet from childhood as a smudge above the barn. A teenager, sleepless from exams, finds a glow that looks like a promise. A long-haul driver pulls over to let his eyes adjust and finds, above the interstate, a faint brushstroke trailing the city haze. In many homes, the sound is not even heard. It is imagined. Yet the imagination is not wrong. It is built from real things: the sun, the wind, the dust, the slow rotation of an object older than our maps. If there is a secret in the pattern, it is this: The universe is steady enough for us to notice small changes. The steadiness is a product of this. The universe is steady enough for us to notice small changes. The steadiness is small changes. The steadiness is a kindness. It lets instruments align. It lets amateurs learn. It lets wonder take root in busy lives. The anomaly could be a law we haven't named, a resonance inside the iron wake, a dance between grains and fields. Or it could be something we will never fully translate. Either way, it has already given its first gift. It has reminded scattered people that they are not alone under the endless night. In Ohio, the nurse powers down the radio and watches her breath fade from the glass. In Nairobi, the student saves the stack and writes a clear label on the folder. In Australia, the retiree lowers the antenna and listens to the crickets return. Around them, thousands of small acts close with a click or a sigh, and the silence that follows feels fuller than before. High above, the traveler continues, small against the cradle of silence. The flutter may weaken or grow. The tail may blur into the dark. Yet for those who listened, a gentle echo remains, the memory of a shared pause, the soft certainty that the sky can still gather strangers into a single patient thought. The glow thins, the world turns, and somewhere in the drifting quiet, the hidden pattern waits, almost ready to be understood. The night is clear and gentle, the kind of night that makes even a busy observatory feel like a quiet porch. Domes open. Again, lenses cool again. Clocks are set again, not to human hours, but to the slow rhythm of an ancient traveler sliding along its open trajectory. The team calls this the second pass, not because the comet returns, but because their gaze does. They come back with steadier hands, cleaner calibrations, and a map of questions they could not answer the first time. Under the soft glow of control room monitors, they align timestamps across oceans, test cables, recheck biases, and let the instruments settle into the cradle of silence. Now the telescopes breathe in the sky. Starlight falls into mirrors and funnels into spectrographs. The readouts look plain to the untrained eye: numbers, lines, faint hills of brightness, but to the watchers, they are a landscape. Here's sodium, soft and yellow in the data. There is cyanogen, a pale signature threading through the night like a thin ribbon. Nothing roars in this scene. Nothing shouts. The comet's voice, if it has one, speaks in delicate marks that repeat, only when everything aligns. The team is ready to see that alignment more clearly than before. They synchronize observatories like a choir finding the same key. One telescope watches the coma's soft haze. Another measures the ion tail, that silver whispering flag that points away from the sun. A radio instrument listens to the background hiss of the solar wind. Their clocks tick in concert, down to the quiet fractions of a second. The first pass taught them caution. The second pass gives them timing. They want to know if the flutter, the strange, steady tremor they saw in the data truly sits inside the comet's dance, or if it only looked that way from one lonely window in time. In the dark, the comet turns. Its rotation is slow, like a lighthouse in fog. Along its surface, a small jet wakes, thin as a pencil line at first, then brightening. It is not centered. It is a little off to one side, as if a hidden seam in the ice has cracked where sunlight strikes at a slant. The jet does what jets do. It pushes dust and gas out into space. But tonight, with stronger eyes and cleaner clocks, the watchers notice how that thin beam becomes a metronome. When the jet faces the solar wind, a rhythm strengthens. When it swings away, the rhythm softens. The pattern is shy and patient, but it is there. They lay the comet's rotation curve on one screen and the flutter on another. The lines don't line up perfectly, not like gears. The flutter trails by a small, repeating offset, always late by a sliver. It is a lag you could step over, an angle you could cover with your thumb held at arm's length, yet it does not wander. It settles again and again as the comet turns and the jet winks on like a lighthouse. The flutter answers with the same small delay, as if the geometry itself has set a rule. First the jet meets the wind, then the wind writes a tiny signature into space. Spectrograms confirm that the coma is not featureless. Sodium glows faintly, a dust of tiny embers. Cyanogen draws a ghostly line. These are ordinary things in a comet's breath, but arranged here they feel like notes in a song. The watchers do not say song. They say correlated features. Still, the mood in the room shifts. Coffee cools untouched. Pens stop tapping. The second pass does not only bring new data, it brings a new way of seeing. The comet is not screaming for attention. It is doing what it is, and that appears to be enough to make a pattern. Outside, the sky is soft and still. The ion tail stretches like a silver ribbon across the darkness. A brushstroke the wind keeps pulling longer. Dust grains drift like slow snow. Every particle seems to know the river it floats in, the quiet push from the sun, the magnetic lines you cannot see. The team imagines those lines not as wires, but as threads in a gentle veil. When the jet turns into that veil, grains align, charges build and collapse, and a tiny, repeatable flutter enters the stream. It is not a voice, it is a consequence. Yet the heart does what it does. It hears a whisper dot to make sure they are not dreaming with their eyes open. They cross-check everything. They compare nights with strong solar wind to nights when the wind is calm. They compare spectra with and without the jet in view. They shift windows of analysis forward and backward and watch the offset stay put like a landmark on a shoreline. The offset is small, but it is stubborn. It says, in its quiet way, that the flutter is not tied to the comet's rotation alone, and not tied to the wind alone, but to the geometry between them. A triangle of forces, a tiny fortress of angles, holds the secret. The team maps this triangle. One side is the comet's spin axis, slow and steady. One side is the solar wind, invisible but constant enough to count on. The last side is the jet's direction, off-axis, and changing with the comet's turn. Where these sides meet, the flutter grows, then softens, then grows again. The offset remains the same, even as the brightness of the jet rises and falls. That is the part that feels like a key sliding into a lock. Not the volume, but the timing. Not the shout, but the delay. The watchers are careful, but the room warms with gentle wonder. If the comet spoke, it did so by being exactly what it is. There is beauty in how ordinary the ingredients are. Dust, light, ions, rotation. Nothing supernatural, nothing beyond the reach of a patient mind. A telescope cannot taste all, but people can, and they do. They taste it in the way starlight becomes numbers, and numbers become a shape that holds still in the noise. They taste it when a small lighthouse on a turning rock lines up with a wind no one can see and makes a pattern that returns like a tide. The world is full of complicated things. This feels simple, almost kind. Data keeps coming. The second pass is not a single night. It is a long, quiet stretch of them, stitched by timing and trust. On some nights, the flutter is gentle, like a memory. On others, it is clearer, like a bell heard far away. Even then, it never becomes loud. It stays in its lane, narrow and precise. A faint tremor that would be easy to miss if nobody had thought to listen twice. The watchers build stacks of plots. They highlight the consistent lag. They underline the way the signal strengthens when the jet faces the wind, then softens as the jet swings away. They note how the sodium and cyanogen features rise and fall nearby, agreeing without trying to agree. In the quiet hours, someone asked the question that floats through the summary of every night. Could such structure carry information? The answer is gentle. It could, the way a wave could carry a leaf. But a leaf on a wave does not spell a word, and the team sees no code here, no carriers, no clear modulation beyond what the geometry itself imposes. It is not a message sent. It is a message revealed, a natural code arising because the universe likes to rhyme when the setup is right. Even that idea, explained softly, feels like a lullaby, meaning that does not demand belief, only attention. They try not to reach beyond what the data supports. They do not declare omens. They do not predict harbingers. They describe what holds. The flutter correlates with the jet. Its strength rises when the jet faces into the solar wind. A consistent lag appears and stays steady. Spectral features confirm the material setting of the scene. If something is hidden, it is not hidden by intent. It is hidden the way patterns hide until you look twice with better eyes. A breeze brushes the dome. The night leans toward morning. Inside, screens display the last integrations of the session. Pale hills on dark backgrounds. The watchers log the details, mark the timing, store the files. They know that future nights will add more stones to this quiet path. They also know that the comet is already drifting outward, step by step, toward colder light. That knowledge adds a softness to their notes, as if they are writing down the story of a guest who is packing to leave. Outside, the silver ribbon thins. The lighthouse jet will fade with distance and chill. The wind will keep its river going, but the leaf will be farther from the shore. None of this is sad. Not exactly. It is the way of travelers. The watchers sit for a while after the last exposure finishes, listening to the fans and the distant hum of the tracking motors. They are thinking about how a small angle can hold. A secret about how a consistent delay can draw a boundary around a truth. They are thinking about how something so faint can become a steady companion once you learn its rhythm. When they close the dome, the sky looks the same as it did when they opened it. Quiet, star-sprinkled, patient. Yet they do not feel the same. The second pass gave them stronger eyes, but it also gave them a gentler touch. They know now that a comet does not need to try to be mysterious. It only needs to keep turning, keep facing the wind at the right moments, keep being itself. The rest, the flutter, the echo, the sense that something is almost saying something, arrives on its own. They leave the logs tidy, the plots labeled, the timing aligned. The reports will be simple to read and calming to hold, a geometry sketched. In clean lines, a rhythm traced with soft pencil, a small delay that never wanders. If someone had told them months ago that this would feel like hearing a reply, they might have smiled and changed the subject. Tonight, they still smile, but they do not change the subject. They let the idea rest beside the data, like a folded blanket beside a telescope chair. There if needed, harmless if not dawn edges the horizon. The last stars fade, and with them the silver ribbon dims to a thought. The world wakes and forgets for a while that an unknown traveler crossed the sky. At all. But in rooms where the plots are pinned and the timing is marked, the memory stays bright and quiet. A small jet, a steady wind, a lag that does not drift, these are enough to keep a wonder alive. The night will come again, and with it the chance to listen once more, because the pattern still moves where the light grows thin, and in that drifting quiet, something patient is waiting to be understood. A slow rhythm moves through the night like a tide you cannot see, only feel. It is not a word. It is not a voice. It is a pattern soft, steady, almost shy riding the hush between starlight and static. The narration settles into that hush. Imagine lying back beneath a sky that looks endless and kind. Somewhere far above, a comet traces its open trajectory, an ancient traveler wrapped in a gentle veil. Instruments listen while telescopes watch. In those long, quiet seconds, the question forms, how does meaning begin? meaning often begins with repetition. The mind trusts what returns. Footsteps on a porch, waves on a beach. A clock that ticks the same way every time. Nature uses repetition. 2. Pulsars spin like celestial lighthouses, their beams sweeping past us with a precision that feels like a promise. Meteor showers appear on schedule, as if the sky itself kept a well-worn calendar. Even the sun breathes in cycles. The solar wind rises and falls like a calm tide against the cradle of silence. We learn to hear these returns, and once we hear them, we cannot help searching for the next. Modulation is the next breath. A voice is not only repeated sound, it is shaped sound. Whisper and shout, rise and fall, a vowel colored by air and throat. Nature modulates as well. The wind through a grove is not one note. It bends around trunks and moves through leaves, turning pressure into a soft chorus. In space, a spectrograph takes light and spreads it into lines, dark and bright like bars on a page of music. Molecules add their marks. Ions glow and fade. A comet's coma brightens near perihelion, then thins as it coasts outward. The story is told in changes, not just in returns. Entropy enters like a teacher with a gentle, steady hand. In a messy room, entropy grows. In a perfect chant, entropy is held back. Information needs structure against noise, a small fortress to keep its shape. When scientists search the sky for a signal, they search for a pattern that resists falling apart. They look for order that keeps returning, even while the world tries to blur it. A carrier wave that will not scatter. A rhythm that does not unravel. A code that survives a long journey through dust and wind and the faint electricity that lives between stars. This is why SETI asks for redundancy. A lone pulse can be an accident. A rain of pulses, repeated with purpose, begins to look like choice. It is also why SETI wants a carrier. A voice rides on a stable tone the way a boat rides a river. The tone must be steady enough to survive, yet flexible enough to carry change. Error correction matters too, because any path through space adds flaws. A good message carries its own repair kit, the way good stitching survives a pull. These are the simple rules of looking for meaning in the dark. Repeat, carry, correct. Against those rules, the flutter near the comet feels delicate, even fragile. It lacks a clear carrier and the handwriting of error correction. It is not a broadcast in any ordinary sense. It drifts like a brush stroke across the sky, present, structured, yet shy of the requirements that would turn structure into speech. And still the pattern returns, not every night, not with perfect force, but often enough that listening becomes an act of hope. You hear it and think, this might be nothing. You hear it again and think, if it is nothing, it is a beautiful nothing. There is a reason this tempts the mind. The brain is a finder of patterns. It keeps you safe by predicting what comes next. You stand at a shore and learn the waves. You watch the night and learn the path of a bright wandering star. When repetition meets modulation and refuses to dissolve into noise, your thoughts lean in. Could nature be speaking a language that is not words? Could a comet, pressed by the solar wind, shaped by invisible fields, hum a gentle reply that teaches by example rather than by instruction? Consider the pulsar again, that cosmic clock. No one sent it. Yet we use it. Its beat is reliable enough to time a spacecraft's path or calibrate a telescope's watch. It is unintentional usefulness, an accident that becomes a tool. Meteor. Patterns are the same. A comet crumbles. Dust spreads along its orbit, and Earth passes through the stream like a traveler moving through a faint fog. The fog returns each year, and we give it a name. We predict it. We plan for it. Meaning appears in our response, not in the falling dust itself. Now imagine the flutter as a tide that learns. It is not learning in the human sense. It is learning in the way a guitar string learns a note when plucked, or a wind chime learns a song when the air is right. The system settles into a mode. The mode returns. The return becomes a guide. The solar wind pushes, charged grains align. Small jets from the comet's surface start and stop. A phase offset lingers like a held breath between turns. None of this means intention. All of this means form. And form, when it persists, feels like the beginning of language. The film of night thickens. The narration stays soft, mid-tempo, almost like a lullaby. Instruments stare, patient and exact. The spectrograph sees tiny changes in light. The telescope follows the orbit with slow, careful steps. The flutter holds to a narrow band, widens, then returns, as if it were a reed vibrating in a steady breeze. The breeze is the solar wind. The reed is the plasma tail. The breath is the sun itself. If you listen long enough, the cadence becomes familiar. You could fall asleep to it, not because it lulls you into forgetting, but because it lulls you into trust. Trust, in this case, is not belief. It is discipline. Scientists do not accept a message without the marks of intention. Redundancy repeated across instruments. A carrier that persists. An internal grammar, even a simple one, that survives the long path from source to sensor. The flutter offers none of these. It offers shape without syntax. Yet a paradox remains. Shape without syntax can teach. A snowflake has no alphabet, but it carries a lesson in symmetry. A ripple in a pond has no words, but it measures the stone that made it dot. So what is the lesson here? Perhaps it is that a reply from the stars might arrive first as structure, not as speech. A reminder that order can rise out of simple rules, a comet's rotation, a jet's angle, the pressure of ions moving like a silent wind. The pattern says, this is how the pieces fit when they are nudged by light and magnetism. This is how dust becomes a hymn without meaning to sing. From that hymn, we learn to listen better. We refine our instruments. We log what holds, what wavers, what repeats. In learning its limits, we learn our own. Entropy returns, calm and sure. Noise swells when storms flare on the sun. The flutter weakens and almost disappears, then returns in a smaller, tidier form. The signal is not a fortress. It is a tent, beautiful in still weather, fragile when the gusts arrive. You might feel a little ache at that fragility, the way you feel when a memory starts to fade at the edges. But the ache is useful too. It reminds you that meaning, like a comet's glow, is often a cooperation between what is out there and what is inside you. There is caution in this. The human heart wants omens. The eye wants pattern. The mind wants reply. To keep wonder honest, we keep the rules close. Redundancy. Carrier correction. We do not grant intention just because the rhythm is lovely. We allow all without surrender. We allow hope without haste. This is the delicate balance of a clear night. You let mystery rest, and you let measurement lead. Picture now the comet as a messenger that does not know it carries a message. A harbinger with nothing to warn, only a soft glow to share. The solar wind moves over its surface and draws out a low, regular tremor. That tremor rides the tail like a note held beneath a choir. It is not language, yet it is not chaos. In that space between, the imagination wakes. It asks a careful question. If a harmless omen can still teach, what would we learn? We would learn patience. Meaning loves time. Orbits take time. Spectra take time. Averages take time. The mind takes time to calm, to hear a faint echo against a larger hiss. You can feel that as you breathe in the dark. You can feel it as the narration slows. Wait long enough, and even the most fragile shape declares itself. Wait longer, and you may learn that the shape was always there, and that your seeing was the part that needed to arrive. We would learn humility. A pattern can be beautiful and still be only weather. The sky is full of weather-iron weather. Dust. Weather, gravity weather, and each kind paints the night in motions we are only beginning to read. Calling it a reply may be a kindness we give ourselves. If so, it is not a foolish kindness. It is a human one, and it keeps us close to the work. It keeps us building better ears. We would learn design by listening. If one day we wanted to write back into the sky, we would copy what survives. We would repeat. We would carry. We would correct. We would test our message against noise and wind until it could live there without our help. We would choose a tone that keeps its shape, a modulation that speaks even when half of it is lost on the way. And we would send it with the calm that this chapter carries. No drama, no fear. Only a steady hand and a long view. As the night leans toward morning, the sky is still. A comet is a drifting shadow at the edge of sight, an orbit line etched across your inner map. The flutter settles into the background, not gone, just small. You close your eyes and keep the cadence anyway. It feels like a tide that remembers. It feels like a breeze that keeps time. It feels like the first page of a language that begins not with letters, but with breath. And then the thought arrives, gentle and weightless. Perhaps the lesson was never to find a voice in the noise, but to become quiet enough that the structure of the world could teach you how to listen. The instruments hum. The wind in space moves on. The luminous haze thins to a fine thread. Somewhere, order gathers itself again. Slight and persistent, like a distant surf you can almost hear. The silence deepens, yet hidden in that silence is something waiting to be understood. A soft glow slips along the morning edge of space, already dimmer than it was. 3-1 Atlas has rounded the sun. Its bright coma, once a small, luminous cloud, thins into a gentle veil, as if the ancient traveler has drawn a curtain over its own face. The tail, teased by solar wind, stretches long and pale, a brushstroke across the sky that fades at the edges. Telescopes continue to follow, though the image now feels more like a memory than a flare. The comet's trajectory is sure and open. Orbit carries it away, no closed loop to bring it back. Gravity gave it a fast turn at perihelion, and now the curve straightens, a quiet exit lane to deep space. Spectrographs, which once revealed delicate signatures in starlight, return fewer lines to read. Dust production slows. Jets sputter like embers at the end of a fire. The spectacle softens into a drifting shadow, traveling past the constellations we know by heart. Instruments that listen for the flutter, the curious, narrow tremor once riding the solar wind now register something weaker, almost shy. The pattern fades, returns in brief, tender bursts, then blurs again into the background hiss. It is not silence exactly, but the way a voice trails off when the speaker is walking away. You can hear it if you listen hard, the way you catch the last words of a friend turning a corner and disappearing down the street. Observers log the timings with calm precision. They align detections across antennas and optical exposures, subtract noise, and match each flutter to the comet's rotation and the small jets still active on the sunlit side. The bursts arrive most clearly when a remaining jet faces the solar wind. The combinational geometry just right for a moment. Then the angle slips and the flutter thins into almost nothing. Science remains patient. Note the time, note the wind, note the brightness. Move on. It is here, in this quiet, that a different feeling stirs the human ache. For weeks, the unknown traveler felt close enough to touch, a presence written in light and dust. Now, the luminous haze has become a pale outline. Awe turns into memory the way twilight becomes night. People who watched from rooftops and fields look up again and find only steady stars. The cradle of silence closes gently over the path where the comet had been. Orbit models stretch outward like careful maps into a land no one will visit. They predict the path with simple grace. The comet will pass beyond the reach of easy sight, beyond the faint glow of our neighborhood's dust, into the wide dark that belongs to no planet. The numbers do not hurry. They state a destiny without drama. This traveler is not ours to keep. From here on, it will be lonely in a way only space understands, timeless, slow, and patient. A few late flares of activity decorate the retreat. A tiny outburst, perhaps a pocket of ice exposed. A quick brightening as sunlight grazes a new face of the nucleus. A brief ripple in the ion tail where the solar wind knots and unknots itself. Each event is small, like the last sparks when a campfire collapses into red coals. The telescopes catch them, grateful for the lights they are, then return to longer exposures and wider fields. The lingering question remains. If the flutter once felt like a reply, does its fading mean the conversation is over? The voice of the documentary slips into gentle explanation. Patterns in nature often grow loud near thresholds and quiet in the steady state. At perihelion, forces entangled, dust lifted, ions aligned, magnetic fields turned. A chorus happened. Away from the sun, the breeze slackens. The reeds stop humming in unison. The river is still there. It only no longer sings in the same repeating way. Even now, the instruments confine the shape of what was. Cross-correlation reveals a weak echo. Stacked spectra hint at a line that once stood sharp and now is a ghost. The cadence floats at the edge of detection, like a dream you try to remember after waking. You recall its outline, the pace, the feeling more than the details. The mind reaches for meaning, then lets it go. Content to call it awe instead of a solved equation. Comet's body is still itself. Rock, ice, dust, and voids. It tumbles with a rhythm only models can follow. The tail, though faint, is still tethered to the sun's breath, pointing away as neatly as a compass needle to a magnetic north. Under the coma's thinning shell, sunlight continues the slow work of warming and release. The cosmic dance has not stopped. It has simply chosen a quieter music that most of us cannot hear far from the domes and dishes. Someone still watches from a backyard. A small telescope, a chair that creaks, a blanket over shoulders. They know the comet is there even if it cannot be seen. The sky cools and clears. A dog sighs at their feet. In the hush, they listen for the softest thing, perhaps not the flutter itself, but the feeling it gave them, that the universe had leaned close for a moment and breathed out a single steady word. There is comfort in how the story narrows. Early chapters filled with brightness. Now the narrative thins to line and shape, to the quiet geometry of a path leaving home. A comet is not a promise, only a passage. To call it a messenger may be poetry, but poetry often carries truths that numbers, precise as they are, leave unsaid. One truth is simple. We were here to witness, and in witnessing, we became part of its brief history near our sun. On some far future night, in another system, someone else might see a soft glow drift across an unfamiliar sky. They will not know us. They will not know this chapter. But they may feel the same calm curiosity, the same small shake inside the chest that comes when a hidden pattern brushes the senses. The traveler will have new dust, a changed face, a different set of whispers. The story will repeat, not in words, but in wonder. For now, the watchers pack away cables, close the domes, and save the final files. The last logs read like lullabies. Clear weather, faint detection, tail length uncertain. A page turns in an archive no one reads aloud, yet everyone adds to lines. Of time and light inked across the dark. The comet keeps going. The earth keeps turning. The instruments cool. The sky, older and larger than all of it, makes room for the next quiet thing. And still, if you step outside and lift your eyes, you might sense a trace, a memory hanging in the air like the afterscent of rain. The glow has gone thin, the pattern fallen back beneath the wind, but the feeling remains, fragile and eternal at once. The conversation may be quieter now, but in the drifting quiet, the universe sometimes answers with silence. It is not empty silence with something hidden inside, waiting to be understood. A hush settles over the sky like a gentle veil. In that hush, great forces breathe. The comet we have followed becomes a small, steady lantern at the edge of vision, an ancient traveler moving on its open trajectory. Its orbit is only one line among many. Above it and far beyond, other rhythms begin to rise soft at first, then clear enough to feel. The universe does not shout. It murmurs. It keeps time in light and shadow, in ripples and echoes, in signals that pass through starlight and fall into our instruments like snow. If you let the noise of the day drain away, you can sense the choir beginning. Listen to a pulsar. It turns. With the precision of a clock, a lighthouse of radio beams sweeping space. Each spin sends a heartbeat across the dark. Telescopes catch those blinks and tally them, tick by tick like a pulse under a finger. The sound is not a sound, yet it feels like one regular, sturdy, comforting. Long ago, the first pulses confused astronomers. The patterns seemed too crisp to be natural, an unexplained code beating through the night. Now we know, a star collapsed into a compact drum, spinning fast, its magnetic field slicing beams into the void. What we once called an anomaly is now a metronome, a teacher of time. Far away, a supernova exhales. Its long sigh is still traveling, a moving shell through a nebula that glows like shimmering curtains. That light shows where the shock front presses dust and gas, shaping knots, stirring future stars. In photographs, the colors feel like paint, but each hue is a fingerprint. Through a spectrograph, oxygen and hydrogen sing separate notes. The wavelengths spread into lines, and the lines into stories. How hot, how fast, how dense. To the eye, it is a soft glow suspended in endless night. To the mind, it is a ledger of change, a whisper written in chemistry. What you see is the past arriving late, a memory made visible by patient glass. And in the deepest well lies the black hole, a fortress of gravity where light bends like reeds in a current. We cannot see the center. We see the pattern around it, the forbidden curve of orbits, the way starlight shears. The hot ring that blurs and then sharpens in images built from radio dishes spread across Earth. Nothing speaks there in words. Yet the distortion itself is a phrase, a mark of presence. Space-time folded, time stretched, photons veering and escaping in tight arcs. It is a different kind of lullaby, heavy and slow, drawing your thoughts toward the edge and then back again. The mind leans over the railing and wonders, then drifts in awe. The comet's faint flutter returns, smaller now, almost a memory. It is one instrument among many. Think of an orchestra tuning strings, winds, percussion, each voice searching for a center. The galaxy is like that, but the center is everywhere. Pulsars provide rhythm. Supernova remnants add breath. Black holes add weight. Nebulae add shimmer. Meteor showers embroider the near sky with quick notes. Tiny meteors scratching silver lines that vanish into the cradle of silence. The comet's tail becomes a brush stroke across the stars. The solar wind tugs it into shape. The ancient traveler keeps its course, neither conductor nor soloist, only a steady part of the grand sound. Not every harmony is bright. Some are hidden, folded inside other light. In the atmospheres of exoplanets, molecules trace delicate letters. A telescope separates a star from its small companion not by sight but by subtraction. As the planet crosses the star, its air steals a thin slice of brightness. A spectrograph reads that stolen light and finds water vapor, sodium, methane soft. Clues of weather, clouds, haze. No one hears a breeze on that world. Yet the pattern of wavelengths is a kind of whisper. It tells of temperature and pressure, of dayside fire and nightside calm, of winds that carry heat like invisible rivers. It is a lullaby from a place no one has touched. On summer nights, Earth receives simpler music. A meteor shower arrives. When our orbit crosses an old trail of dust, the trajectory is predictable, yet the display feels new each time. You step outside. The air cools. The sky opens. One meteor, then another, then a cluster like sparks from a quiet fire. The mind makes wishes because the moment is brief, because the streaks are fragile. But there is science lying underneath. The dust came from a parent comet centuries ago. Each grain meets our atmosphere and ionizes the air, writing a glowing line that fades in seconds. The laws are firm, yet the feeling is soft. A lullaby of brief visitors, proof that even small stones can sing as they fall. Elsewhere, a galaxy cluster glows like a city seen from far away. Its map is written in many lights. The steady shine of old stars, the blue scatter of newer ones, the X-ray shimmer of hot gas bound by gravity, the weak lensing that reveals dark matter by the way it bends distant shapes. Together, they form a slow chord, deep and long. In that chord, galaxies orbit, collide, and merge over billions of years. The choir's tempo is beyond any human measure, yet the image fits on a screen. A person looking up from a quiet room can hold a cluster in one glance and feel both small and connected. Scale becomes a kind of poetry. Back on the edge of our system, the comet passes through the sun's light like a figure behind a curtain. Its coma thins, and the flutter we learn to read becomes intermittent. It is not a loss. It is a lesson in listening. We have learned to let telescopes be ears, to let spectrographs be translators, to let patience turn noise into signal. We have learned that a reply from the cosmos may not be a message sent on purpose. It may be structure born from simple rules played across vast distances. When you accept that, wonder grows instead of shrinking. The mystery isn't smaller. It's kinder. People keep records of these harmonies. The data goes into archives. The images go onto walls and screens. But it also goes somewhere quieter. It goes into memory and becomes a private map. A nurse pausing on a balcony after a night shift. A child on a blanket counting meteors with a grandparent. A truck driver stepping out under desert stars and hearing the gentle rush of distant traffic mixed with the silence of space. The choir follows them. Later, when the day is noisy, a single word, pulsar, nebula, comet can reopen the door to put the vast cool room where everything takes its time. In that room, the rules maintain their calm. Orbits curve. Trajectories intersect. Gravity guides without a voice. The comet keeps moving, a messenger without a letter. The pulsar keeps turning, a clock that never needs winding. The black hole remains a dark well, its edge a bright ring where photons try and almost fail to leave. The supernova's sigh continues through filaments that will one day seed new stars. Meteor showers return on schedule, like gentle holidays. Exoplanet atmospheres keep their secrets and give them away one thin spectrum at a time. The galaxy. Cluster changes almost not at all, except that it does. And we will notice in the far future. And then someone else will notice after us. If you put your ear to the universe, you do not hear one thing. You feel many small certainties adding up to comfort. It is the comfort of rules that leave room for surprise. A spectrograph line shifts by a tiny amount, and the mind leans in. A pulse arrives a fraction early, and the model is updated. A faint glow where none was expected becomes a new nebula, a new ripple, a new note in a score that no one can finish. In a world of fast headlines and bright screens, this slow attention is a kind of hope. It says that awe is renewable. It says that wonder can be taught and learned again. Our comet, now smaller than a thought, continues across the outer dark. It does not know we listened, but listening changed us. We began with a local question: what flutter rides this dust? What pattern sits in this solar wind? And we found ourselves in a broader choir. The choir did not explain everything. It did not need to. It showed how a precise heartbeat and a long sigh can exist together. It showed how a fortress of gravity can still allow light to draw a ring. It showed how a soft glow can hold a catalog of elements, and how a drifting shadow can become a teacher of patience. It reminded us that even when nothing speaks, something is saying enough. Light deepens. The planet turns. Somewhere, a telescope parks at dawn and closes its slit with a soft click. Somewhere else, a small antenna warms in the first sun and waits for the dark to return. Between those two moments lies all the space. A person needs to rest. The choir quiets but does not end. It holds a place for every future pulse and ripple, for every meteor lullaby and nebular curtain, for every unknown traveler whose path will cross our orbit. The last thought before sleep is not a conclusion. It is a gentle question held like a small light. What harmony is passing overhead right now, patient and hidden, waiting for a listener to be still? Chapter 14. Readying the next welcome. Word count 1350. Summary. We outline clear, simple steps. Faster survey telescopes, better all-sky spectrographs, coordinated solar wind monitors, tiny space probes ready to launch on a moment's notice. The mood stays soothing checklists whispered at bedtime. We explain how trajectory solutions improve, how perihelion planning works, and why redundancy matters. Imagine a small fleet riding the solar wind, greeting the next messenger before it fades. The curiosity persists. Could we one day reply by shaping a signal into the wind ourselves? Chapter 15 approaches speculation with care. Future comets, future codes, and a world less fragile under the whisper of stars. A quiet checklist opens like a lullaby. He speaks in a soft studio, lights dim, a slow panorama of the night sky drifting past. She stands at a window in a silent city, watching a faint glow above the rooftops. And you, wherever you are, feel the hush of evening gather around you like a gentle veil. The last messenger has crossed the inner system and is fading into the cradle of silence. Another will follow, perhaps sooner than anyone expects. So the world prepares not with trumpet blasts, but with steady hands and careful plans. The preparation begins with eyes, because every welcome starts with seeing. The first step is speed. Survey telescopes must scan the sky faster, deeper, wider, and do it every clear night. Picture an array of mirrors in desert air and mountain cold, moving in a calm mechanical dance. Their cameras take brief sips of starlight exposures, just long enough to catch a drifting shadow against a fixed grid of constellations. Software compares to night sky with last night's, looking for the tiny displacement that means motion. When the pattern appears, a quiet bell rings in the data. A possible visitor, not an asteroid from our backyard, not a routine comet on a closed orbit. Something on an open trajectory, a line that never loops back. The system flags it, and this world of observers leans closer. But speed without clarity is a dream half remembered. So the second step is precision. Better all-sky spectrographs, ready to split the light as soon as a candidate appears. Imagine a prism drawn across the sky, peeling color into meaning. A spectrograph doesn't look for shapes. It listens for chemistry, sodium lines, cyanogen hints, water vapor ghosts, dust scattered in the solar wind. When a messenger brightens, the instrument whispers, "This is what it is made of." It is the difference between seeing a face in the dark and hearing the voice say a name. And in the soft blue, green, and red of the spectrum, scientists learn whether a visitor behaves like a comet or hides an anomaly that asks for new understanding. The third step is coordination. Our planet is wide, and night takes turns. Telescopes. In the Andes, in Hawaii, in the Canary Islands, in Australia, watch as the Earth rotates, handing the sky from one dome to the next. Networks share timestamps and calibration files, tying observations into a single smooth ribbon of time. Cloud over one mountain? No matter. Another eye wakes under clear air. In this choreography, redundancy is not waste. It is kindness. 2. Confirmations are better than 1, because even quiet truths should be held gently by more than a single hand. If one instrument strays, the others keep the path. This is how a fragile species builds trust with the universe. By checking, then checking again. Some messengers announce themselves with a soft glow of coma blooming as the sun warms the ancient traveler. Others step into view only after a sudden change in brightness, a flare from a fresh jet on the surface. The difference matters for planning. A fourth step, then. Refine trajectory solutions quickly and keep refining them as new data arrives. A trajectory is a promise written in numbers. Where the visitor was, where it is, where it might be tomorrow. With each measurement, the error bars shrink. Ground stations nudge the solution. Spacecraft ephemerides update. The line across the solar system grows confident. And when the line intersects the plane of Earth's orbit, a new kind of planning begins. Perihelion planning is the fifth step, and it breathes like a tide. As the messenger approaches the sun, the solar wind stiffens and folds around it. Radiation lifts dust, jets spin. The tail becomes a brush, stroke thousands of miles long. Observers time their exposures carefully. Too long, and the image smears. Too short, and the signal falls back into noise. Solar monitors report the wind's density and direction. If a coronal mass ejection erupts, the plan flexes. A surge of particles can flood the scene with static or, just as intriguing, reveal structures otherwise hidden. A schedule of night after night turns into a living map of how light and wind sculpt a body older than any city on Earth. The sixth step is to prepare little hands for a big sky. Tiny space probes ready to launch on short notice. Think of small craft the size of a suitcase, asleep in clean rooms, each with an eye, a spectrograph, a dust counter, and a radio. The world will keep a few of these on the shelf tested, fueled, quiet, so that when a messenger appears, one can be sent to meet it. Not to chase for years, but to sprint for weeks. The launch is a whisper, a pale flame at dawn. The probe unfolds and turns its dish toward home. It tucks itself into the trajectory, like a leaf into a stream. Weeks later, it passes through the luminous haze, sampling grains as they drift past. Each grain tells a story, where the dust formed, how it was heated, what it touched in the dark between stars. If one probe is good, a small fleet is better. That is the seventh step, multiplicity. Some craft skim the sunward side, others cut. Across the tail, others ride downstream in the iron plume. One might carry a magnetometer to feel the wind's invisible fingers. Another could watch for faint electric crackles, the tiny arcs where charged grains touch and part. Redundancy here is more than backup. It is parallax for truth. When three eyes see the same gesture from different angles, the gesture becomes real. The fleet shares time signals and trades notes in narrow bands. On Earth, dishes turn slowly, tracking the tiny voices. The data arrives as numbers with no drama. The drama lives in what those numbers let us imagine. None of this works without calm discipline. So the eighth step is practice. Simulation rooms run night drills for new arrivals. Mock alerts, mock trajectories, mock interference. Teams practice, passing the sky from one observatory to the next. Engineers rehearse power cycles, antenna swaps, and memory dumps. Students learn to name the parts of the comet in their sleep: nucleus, coma, dust tail, ion tail. They practice saying perihelion without rushing, as if speaking the word could bend the heat away. This is bedtime training for a planet that means. To listen well. In parallel arrives the ninth step: open data tempered with care. When an anomaly appears, some flutter in the wind, some hidden pattern in the spectrograph, there is a path for sharing it widely without losing rigor. Raw files, posted with calibration notes. Analysis code released with comments simple enough to follow by lamplight. A record of what was tried and what failed, because failures teach shape to the final answer. Public eyes add strength, and public excitement adds patience. People sit on porches and rooftops and in dark parks, looking up, knowing they are part of a single listening. Wonder, shared softly, wears well. The 10th step leans into humility, define the limits of meaning. When nature writes with rhythm pulsars ticking, jets switching on and off, dust forming waves in the wind, it tempts the mind to hear language. The system will carry a checklist, not to crush wonder, but to protect it. Has the pattern repeated? Across instruments? Does it persist when the comet rotates? Does it track the solar wind? Do the numbers carry the signature of a transmitter, or only the signature of a dance? The answer often will be that physics is enough. And that answer is not smaller. It is a kind of kindness. The universe telling us that even unplanned songs can sound like messages when heard in a quiet room. Now, close your eyes for a moment and picture what ready truly looks like. A dusk blue control room. Screens with gentle colors. A map of the inner system with a thin silver line arcing through it. The trajectory of the next unknown traveler. On another screen, the sun smolders, its surface seething with slow storms. Instruments on Earth and in orbit watch for the wave of particles to roll outward. In a clean room, a small probe sleeps with its lens capped, waiting for a name and a time. A technician moves softly, not to wake the air. On the wall, a clock with no numbers, only a circle where one hand turns like a planet around a star. Time here is not a straight road. It is an orbit of readiness.
All of this, the fast eyes, the patient ears, the nimble hands, exists for a moment that may last only weeks. Discovery to get by. The world will watch a messenger climb, crest and fade, and in that arc, ancient questions gather like dew. Where did it begin? What did the dark between stars carve into its ice? What is our reaction, the careful, shared, gentle reaction, say about who we are? The plan's purpose is not just data. It is dignity. It is meeting the unknown with order and wonder at once. And still, in the hush between steps, a question lingers like a soft tone at the edge of hearing. If a comet can speak by merely being what it is, dust, ice, motion, and a wind, could we one day answer back using the same materials? A harmless shaping of the solar breeze. A tiny modulation written in the drifting ions. Not to shout, not to claim, only to say hello in the language of physics. The idea is tender and should be carried that way. For now, it rests inside the plan as a faint note penciled in the margin. So the checklist and the way they began: eyes, ears, hands, heart. Faster surveys to find the traveler, while it's still only a rumor of light. Better spectrographs to turn color into meaning. Coordinated monitors to feel the wind that sculpts every tale. Small probes to meet the messenger before it fades. Redundancy, discipline, humility, because truth deserves more than a single witness. The night leans over the world, and the world leans back, attentive and calm, holding a place in the dark for whatever arrives next. When the lights of the control room dim and monitors slide into screensavers of slow nebulae, someone will pause at the door and look once more at the curved line on the system map. Not a loop, but an open path. Beyond the walls, A city sighs into sleep. Above it, stars keep their quiet places. Somewhere out there, in the broad dark between suns, an ancient traveler has already turned its face toward ours. It will come when it is ready, and when it does, the silence will deepen. Yet hidden in that silence will be something waiting to be understood. A soft idea drifts in like a tide at night. If the comet could hum by accident, could Earth hum on purpose? Imagine the planet wrapped in a gentle veil of charged particles. The solar wind brushing past our orbit, a slow river of ions and fields. In that river, picture a faint, human-made ripple. Not a shout, not a beacon. A brush stroke across the sky, so light it wouldn't wake a sleeping child. A hello written in physics. The thought stays small and kind. No giant transmitters. No blinding lasers. Just near-Earth space, where satellites ride their orbits and the aurora paints the poles. Engineers sketch the scene on a whiteboard. A thin cloud of harmless, electrically responsive dust released far above the atmosphere. A set of low-power ion beams nudging the cloud's charge, and magnetic loops shaping the pattern. So it rises and falls in a steady cadence. The point wouldn't be to yell across the galaxy. The point would be clarity. An intentional rhythm that nature could make on its own, but rarely does so neatly. In plain terms, it works like this. Charged grains respond to fields the way reeds respond to wind. If a quiet field varies on purpose, up a little, down a little, the grains align, then relax in a repeating way. Far away, a sensitive spectrograph might see the change as a faint, regular tremor in starlight scattered from that cloud. An antenna tuned to plasma waves might hear a soft flutter, like a heartbeat under the whisper of stars. Nothing dangerous. Nothing that changes orbit or breaks the cradle of silence around Earth. Just a small signature, as gentle as the wake of a rowboat on a still lake. The language of the chapter remains careful. This is a thought experiment, a bedtime sketch. It asks for slow breathing and patient steps. If such a ripple were ever made, it would have to be clean and kind, visible to our own telescopes, reversible and brief. Like writing your name with a finger in morning fog, then letting the sun erase it. The cadence would live and fade without scars. But even soft ideas need rules. Clarity matters. If the pattern is too plain, it looks natural and vanishes into the background. If it is too clever, it risks confusion with satellites, radio spill, or the fragile work of other astronomers. So the design must choose an interval that does not mimic pulsars, does not echo the spin of common spacecraft, and does not step on protected bands. It should live where the wind itself is steady enough to carry it, yet quiet enough that nature rarely plays the same tune. Engineers might choose a simple motif. Long, short, short, a pause, long, short, short, repeating with patient restraint. Something that says made without saying loud. Ethics breathe through the plan like fresh air. No harm above all. The dust must be non-toxic, ultra-thin, and sparse. Dispersed at altitudes where it cannot fall into airways or coat solar panels. The ion beams must be low energy and pointed, touching only the test cloud, not the shared commons of orbit. The magnetic loops must be local and temporary, powered off when measurements end. An entire attempt must be declared openly, with times and coordinates, so no one confuses a lullaby for an omen. If we ever draw a line in the sky, it should be a line everyone can see on the chalkboard first. Even then, there is a softer danger to guard against. The danger of seeing meaning where none was sent. The mind is a talented storyteller. It finds faces in stone, animals in clouds, and prophecies in comets. If a natural flutter can look like intention, an intentional flutter can look like prophecy. That is why clarity needs companions, context, consent, and humility. The experiment would be scheduled for calm solar weather. It would publish its intended pattern in advance. It would invite independent receivers across continents to listen and compare. If they do not hear it, the record should say so plainly. If they do, the record should say only what was heard, not what was believed. Picture the listening itself, because the listening is beautiful. In a mountain observatory, a telescope breathes in starlight and watches the dust cloud glow like a soft lantern. In the high desert, a small antenna leans into the plasma hiss, searching for the gentle cadence laid over the wind. In a coastal lab, a spectrograph combs the light for the faintest shift, a tide pressed by unseen fingers. The pattern is not a word, not a letter. It is a rhythm, a careful tap on the surface of the river, then quiet again. If anyone hears, it will be because patience and craft made their instruments kind enough to whisper with. Would anyone else hear? That question turns outward and grows slow. The solar wind is a backyard current compared with the open ocean between stars. Nothing here escapes easily. The ripple would fade within a few million miles, folded back into the sun's breath. To reach another world, you would need a wider chorus and a stronger conductor. Fields arranged across space, devices repeating the motif for weeks or months, a structure that holds like a drumhead. That is beyond this gentle chapter. Tonight, the answer is honest. Almost no one would hear except us. And yet the act could still mean something. The way a lighthouse matters to its own harbor, even when the coast is empty. Centuries from now, could we recognize our own signature drifting by? The idea is tender and strange. Suppose that long after the devices are gone, a probe launched in our era crosses a region where fields still carry a trace of that old cadence, echoed by some later weather, preserved by chance. Our descendants, reading the probe's logs, might see a long short where none was expected, a memory of village lantern, caught in a wind that never holds still. Or perhaps the signature would live only in archives. Clean plots, careful notes, a few late-night messages between friends at distant observatories, saying we saw it. That would be enough. The halo around Earth holds more than rock and dust. It holds stories about how gently we try to belong. There is also the quiet hope that comes with practice. If we learn to write softly in a local wind, clean, brief, reversible, then one day we might write softly farther out. A dust sail near the moon that changes reflectivity in time with a shared beat. A small swarm at the Lagrange point that dims and brightens in a safe, steady rhythm. A simple shape carved into starlight with patience and consent. Not to summon, not to warn, but to say, someone was here who loved the sky enough to leave a kind mark. The chapter slows, as if the narrator has set the chalk down and opened a window. Outside, night is wide. The planet glides through its orbit, a fragile blue moving along its trajectory, with quiet confidence. In the cradle of silence, satellites blink and the aurora sighs. You can almost feel the solar wind, a touch without hands, brushing the dark like a soft glow only instruments can see. The thought experiment leaves no smoke, no scar. It leaves a question, which is finer, the making or the listening. If the comet's accidental hum taught anything, it was this. Sometimes the universe answers by showing you how it already sings. To answer back, then, would be to sing in the same key, with care, with limits, and with love for the quiet. To write a motif so modest that it disappears the moment you blink, yet honest enough to be found while your eyes are still open. And if no one hears, the act remains, a small rehearsal of grace in the sky that keeps its own time. The air grows still. The instruments rest. Somewhere above the clouds, a drifting shadow fades. In the fading, the possibility lingers like a breath you haven't quite released. The documentary voice slows, as if dimming a lamp. Highways hush to thin silver lines. Windows fold their light, and the world exhales. Above the rooftops and fields, above train tracks cooling in the dark, a faint presence lingers where the eye rarely wanders. 3i/Atlas has already slipped from brightness to memory, from a soft glow to a drifting shadow tucked into the vastness. Yet the feeling of it remains, like the last note of a song you can't quite stop hearing. In that after sound, you sense a gentle flutter, an echo softer than breath, a cosmic whisper laid across the cradle of silence. It helps to think simply. A comet is a traveler. Its orbit is not a loop here, but an open road, a trajectory that comes close and continues on. Telescopes followed that road while it crossed our sky, catching starlight reflected from dust and ice. Spectrographs tease faint lines in the glare. Tiny signatures of simple stuff, the kind that hides in icier places and wakes when sunlight touches it. None of this is loud. It is the opposite. It is a patient, ancient traveler brushing past our day, reminding us that everything moving has a path, and every path tells time. In the quiet of this chapter, pictures replace noise. Imagine a dark field at the edge of town. The grass holds the day's warmth like a secret. You lie back, feeling the earth steady beneath your shoulders, and the sky is a slow river overhead. Somewhere in that river, 3i/Atlas becomes a rumor, then a memory, but the sense of it, of a messenger that came from far, far away and did not stay, lingers, thin as frost. You do not need to see it to know it changed something. You feel that change the way you feel the room settle after a distant train has passed. The mind turns to facts because facts are friendly here. Orbit, comet, trajectory. Plain words that fit soft in the mouth. The telescope is only a mirror with a purpose. Starlight is only travel-worn information. A spectrograph is only a prism that tells us which pieces of light arrive together. Easy ideas, simple as rain, and yet, gathered in the dark, they cradle a warmer truth. Wonder is a bridge, and people cross it. They cross from fear to awe, from loneliness to belonging, guided by it that glowed and then did not. He remembers and she remembers, and you might remember too. A headline, a sketch, a streak marked in pencil on a printout, a voice on the radio saying the words interstellar object in a tone like reading a lullaby. You picture astronomers murmuring in low-lit rooms. You picture classroom globes with ships drawn in the margins. You picture an old story, harbinger, omen, softening into a new one, messenger, witness. The comet did not foretell, it simply passed, and in passing it changed the room inside our heads, the one where questions sleep. As the hours deepen, you can almost hear it again, that flutter that once rode the solar wind like a leaf carried by a wide, invisible river. Not a voice, not even a rhythm you can hum, more like a shimmer in the silence. There, then gone, suggesting that emptiness is not empty. The universe does not shout. It rarely even speaks. It waits, and it moves, and it holds patterns the way a shoreline holds the memory of a tide. Faint, readable if you take your time. When the day was loud, maybe you missed it. Tonight, the quiet leaves room. The narrator's lens turns outward to the settled sky. Stars like grains of salt, a modest haze toward the horizon, the long faint ribbon where our galaxy angles across the roof of night. Somewhere, a small plane blinks. Somewhere, a satellite glides like thought. Beneath them, neighborhoods settle. Dogs sigh. In kitchens, clocks pick their slow fight with sleep. And still above, in an arena too wide to measure without patience, the trace of an ancient traveler dissolves into the common dark. What remains is not the body that left, but the attention it woke. Attention is a kind of gravity. It pulls scattered feelings into a shape. Loneliness toward wonder, awe toward hope. A person alone on a balcony can become part of a constellation of listeners without moving an inch. Another watches from a window at the end of a hospital hall. Another steps outside to take out the trash and forgets to go back in. They share the same roof, the same gentle veil of air, the same river of starlight. None of them can see 3i/Atlas now. All of them can feel the space it opened. Think of everything that had to happen for this to be true. Once, long ago in a nowhere you will never visit, a small, cold thing was pushed into freedom. It crossed fields of dust no one will name, drifted past nebulous smoke and the quiet pulses of distant suns. It did not choose Earth. It simply arrived near enough for us to notice. In that noticing, we rehearse an old human art, looking, measuring, asking, and refine it with new, kind tools. The result is gentle. We learned a little more. We slept a little kinder. Our dreams tilted toward larger rooms. And in those rooms, simple images anchor the mind. A comet is chalk on a slate sky. An orbit is a ribbon loosening in a breeze. Trajectory is a finger tracing how the ribbon moves. The telescope is a patient eye. The spectrograph, a translator of color to meaning. None of these images are exact. They are a way to relax into big ideas without strain. The way a lullaby carries truths too heavy to lift in daylight words. If the science keeps you grounded, the story helps you float. Together, they are balance. Balance, too, is a kind of music. The universe keeps time in ways we barely hear. Pulsars in distant rooms. Meteors brushing our atmosphere with brief silver syllables. Faint winds and the sun threading through our days. At the boundary where wind meets ice and dust, soft alignments can happen. Grains can turn and face the stream. Tails can lift like banners. A flutter can appear where no voice is speaking. Call it an anomaly if you like. The word is honest. It only means we do not yet know the simplest story behind a lovely pattern. That, too, is gentle. It means there is room for listening. He steps back from the balcony railing. She pulls a blanket nearer her chin. You close your eyes but do not fully leave. On the far side of the planet, morning prepares its light. Here, the night deepens and the span between stars feels wider, kinder, more exact. In that exactness, you place your questions. Each one a small lantern. Where do such travelers begin? How many never come close enough to see? What else crosses our sky unnoticed because our lives rush too loud? You need no answers to fall asleep. The act of asking steadies a mind, like a boat tied gently to a pier. Memory, too, is a pier. It takes in what drifts by and holds it by a single rope of feeling. The comet will leave, the charts will file away, but the comet offered, that sense that the world is larger and therefore more forgiving, stays. You might feel kinder in the morning, without knowing why. You might look up at a pale noon and think of dusk glowing where no one watches. You might, without a reason you can name, walk a little slower past a window, as if the sky could hum and you could hear it. The voice of the film lowers another notch, like a tide going out. The camera would show rooftops cooling, empty bleachers, the quiet metal of a child's bicycle. It would pan to the north, to the east, to the point where the horizon turns thin and blue, and then lift slowly until the familiar shapes grow small and the world holds itself like a breath. Up there, night-side continents are cloud and black water, cities like scattered embers, snowfields like folded paper. Above even that, the air becomes shorthand and then nothing, and the stars resume their older language. The older language does not rush. It measures in long sentences you feel more than understand. Stars slow their turning. Space makes its quiet arguments about distance and time. Somewhere, far down the corridor of our future, another unknown traveler will pass through the same classroom of light, and if we are patient and gentle and still very curious, we will notice again. There will be orbits to trace, and spectrographs to read, and careful lines to draw. But before all of that, there will be a person in the dark thinking, I hear something. It is small. It is kind. It asks nothing except that I make enough quiet to hear. So the night offers a last, smooth breath. Streetlights blink once and hold steady. The world lies like a hand open under the sky. Three Eyes / Atlas is gone, but in the space it left there is no wound, only room. Room for a question to take off its shoes and sit. Room for a hope to set down its weight. Room for sleep to arrive without hurry. If you listen to the silence, there is a texture in it, like fine sand under tidewater, patterns the moon draws without our permission, designs that vanish when you look too hard and return when you soften your gaze. Somewhere a door closes softly. Somewhere a late bus sighs. Somewhere a telescope parks its mirror and rests. Above all of that, the dark keeps its promise to be wide and patient. The last thing you feel is the faintest echo of a flutter, as if the air itself remembers a message that was never sent, only found. The glow has faded into the horizon, but in its fading it carries a question that does not press, does not demand, only waits. Hidden in the quiet, waiting to be understood.